At 2:17 a.m., the front door camera detected movement. No one had entered the house. No one had left. But someone, had walked slowly across the living room. The notification lit up Daniel Harper's phone while he was asleep upstairs. By the time he opened his eyes, the motion alert had already recorded 37 seconds of footage. 37 seconds that would later be replayed in court. 37 seconds that would divide a town in half. And 37 seconds that Daniel would swear, until the day he died, was impossible. Daniel had moved into the Ashford house 6 weeks earlier. It sat at the end of Waverly Lane, slightly detached from the neat suburban grid of Brook Hollow. The house wasn't abandoned. It wasn't derelict. It wasn't even particularly old. Built in 1998, beige siding, 2 stories, finished basement. Perfectly ordinary. That's what made it easier to ignore its history. The for sale sign had gone up quietly. No open houses. No staging. No online virtual tour. Just a price slightly below market value and a seller eager to close. Daniel didn't ask many questions. He was 32, recently divorced, and desperate to leave behind the apartment he'd once shared with his wife. The Ashford house felt like a reset button. Fresh paint. New security system. Smart locks. Cameras on every entrance. A house that watched the outside world. A house that kept him safe. That first week, he slept better than he had in years. By week 3, he started waking up at exactly 2:17 a.m. Every night. No alarm. No sound. Just a sudden, sharp awareness. Like someone had whispered his name directly into his ear. He told himself it was stress. Until the notification came. Daniel rolled over and grabbed his phone. Motion detected, living room. His stomach tightened. He lived alone. He opened the app. The grainy infrared footage filled the screen. The timestamp blinked in the corner, 2:17 and 3 seconds a.m. The camera faced the front door, angled wide enough to capture the couch and coffee table. For the first 10 seconds, nothing moved. Then the shadow appeared. It didn't enter through the door. It didn't come from the hallway. It formed, slowly, near the center of the room. At first it looked like a distortion in the night vision, a flicker of static. Then it stretched upward, tall, human-shaped. The figure moved with deliberate slowness, crossing in front of the couch. Its head turned slightly, almost as if looking directly at the camera. Then it stopped, and stood there, watching. Daniel's thumb trembled over the pause button. The footage ended abruptly. 37 seconds. No exit. No sound. No explanation. He sat upright in bed. The house was silent. Too silent. He forced himself to breathe slowly, listening for footsteps. For doors. For anything. Nothing. After 5 minutes of internal debate, he grabbed the baseball bat he kept under the bed and stepped into the hallway. The upstairs landing overlooked the living room. From his vantage point, he could see the couch. Empty. He descended 1 step at a time. The air felt colder downstairs. He reached the living room and scanned every corner. Nothing. No open windows. No disturbed furniture. The doors were still locked. The security system showed no breach. Daniel checked the timestamp again. 2:17 a.m. He glanced at the microwave clock. 2:26 a.m. 9 minutes had passed. He rewound the footage. Watched it again. And again. On the 4th replay, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. At the very end of the clip, just before it cut off, the shadow shifted toward the staircase. Toward him. Daniel didn't go back to sleep that night. By morning, he had convinced himself it was a glitch. Infrared interference. Maybe headlights passing through the window. He called the security company. Probably a compression artifact, the technician told him. Infrared can do weird things in low light. Daniel almost believed him. Almost. But that night, he sat on the couch and waited. He kept the lights off. Phone in hand. Baseball bat beside him. 2:10 a.m. 2:14. 2:16. His pulse pounded in his ears. 2:17. Nothing happened. He let out a shaky breath. 2:18. The notification came anyway. Motion detected, living room. But he was in the living room. And he hadn't moved. The app showed live footage. From the same camera. But the angle was different. Slightly higher. As if someone had adjusted it. The image displayed Daniel sitting on the couch, staring at his phone, watching himself. His mouth went dry. He slowly looked up at the actual camera mounted above the front door. It hadn't moved. Had it? The live feed continued. On the screen, Daniel's reflection in the black TV screen showed something behind him. Something tall, standing near the staircase. He did not turn around. He couldn't, because in the live feed, the figure leaned closer to him. Daniel spun around. Nothing was there. The living room was empty. When he looked back at his phone, the live feed had frozen. 37 seconds recorded. Again, he called the police the next morning. They arrived at 9:42 a.m. 2 officers. Polite, mildly skeptical. They reviewed the footage. Watched it twice. Probably a software issue, one said carefully. We don't see signs of forced entry. Daniel showed them the second clip, the one where the camera angle had shifted. The officers exchanged a look. Has anyone else had access to your system? No. Previous owner. I changed everything. They walked through the house anyway. Upstairs. Basement. Attic. The attic hatch was in the hallway ceiling. Daniel hadn't been up there since moving in. The officer pulled down the ladder and climbed up first. A long pause followed. Sir. Daniel called. Can you come up here? The attic smelled like dust and insulation. The beam of the officer's flashlight cut across wooden rafters and cardboard boxes left behind by the previous owners. And in the center of the attic floor, a chair, facing the hatch. Daniel stared at it. I didn't put that there. The officer examined the surrounding area. No footprints in the insulation. No disturbed dust. But mounted on a support beam directly above the chair was a camera. Small. Black. Not connected to Daniel's security system. Not connected to anything he recognized. The red recording light blinked once. Then went dark. The camera had no visible wiring. No obvious power source. The officers removed it carefully. Bagged it as evidence. Could be a prank, one suggested, though his voice lacked conviction. Or someone installed it before you moved in. Watching me? Daniel whispered. They didn't answer. By afternoon, the attic camera had been sent for forensic analysis. Daniel sat alone at his kitchen table, staring at the ceiling hatch. He felt exposed, like the house had been studying him, learning him. That night, he didn't wait until 2:17. He left, checked into a motel across town. At 2:17 a.m., his phone buzzed again. Motion detected, living room. He opened the feed with trembling hands. The living room was empty, except for one thing. The attic hatch was open, and the camera angle had shifted upward, as if something inside the house was now watching from above. The clip lasted 37 seconds. At the very end, a sound crackled through the speaker. A whisper, distorted, but unmistakable. Daniel. 3 days later, Daniel Harper would be arrested for murder. The victim would be identified as the previous homeowner, missing for nearly 2 months. The body would be found inside the walls of the Ashford house, and the footage from Daniel's security system would become the most debated evidence the town of Brook Hollow had ever seen. Because when detectives reviewed the recordings from the night the body was supposedly placed in the walls, the only person seen moving through the house at 2:17 a.m. was Daniel, standing in the living room, talking to someone who wasn't there, smiling, and carrying something heavy toward the basement. But Daniel would insist on one thing, over and over. I wasn't alone in that house. And as investigators would eventually discover, he wasn't lying. The Ashford house had a history, a pattern. Every previous owner had reported disturbances at exactly 2:17 a.m. Every one of them had installed cameras. Every one of them had moved out suddenly. Except the last. The last one never left. And somewhere inside the walls, behind the insulation, behind the drywall, behind the carefully painted surfaces, something had been waiting, watching, learning the rhythms of its new owner, waiting for the right moment to step out of the dark. At 2:17 a.m., the smell reached them before the evidence did. It wasn't overwhelming at first, just a faint, sour odor that lingered near the basement staircase. The kind of smell that could be explained away as damp insulation or a forgotten drain. But once the drywall came down, there was no mistaking it. Detective Laura Mendez had worked homicides for 12 years. She knew the scent of decomposition the way some people knew perfume notes. Sweet, heavy, unforgettable. The Ashford house had been holding its breath for weeks. Now it was exhaling. Daniel Harper sat in an interrogation room at the Brook Hollow Police Department while officers cut open the basement wall. He hadn't asked for a lawyer yet. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hands trembling slightly. But there was something else in his expression. Fear. Not the fear of being caught. The fear of not being believed. "You're telling me," Detective Mendez said calmly, "that you had no idea there was a body inside your house?" "Yes." "And you never met the previous owner?" "No. You never went into the walls." Daniel gave a short, broken laugh. "How would I even do that?" Mendez slid a still image across the table. A freeze frame from Daniel's security footage. Timestamp, 2:17 a.m. Daniel stood in the living room, shoulders hunched, gripping something wrapped in a tarp. "Then explain this." Daniel stared at the image. His face drained of color. "I don't remember that." "You don't remember carrying something heavy toward your basement?" "No. I swear I don't." Mendez leaned back. "You're in the house alone." "I wasn't alone." Her eyes sharpened. "Who else was there?" Daniel swallowed. "I don't know." The body belonged to Thomas Ashford, age 54, former owner of the house. Reported missing by his sister 8 weeks earlier. According to neighbors, Thomas had been quiet, kept to himself, worked remotely in IT, rarely socialized. But he wasn't unstable. He wasn't violent. And he certainly wasn't the type to vanish without explanation. Until he did. Financial records showed the house sold quickly after his disappearance. The sale had been handled through a limited power of attorney filed weeks before he went missing. Signed by Thomas Ashford. At least, that's what the documents claimed. Forensics would later determine the signature was genuine. Which raised an unsettling question. When exactly had Thomas signed away his house? And under what circumstances? Back in the interrogation room, Daniel's breathing grew shallow. "You said every night at 2:17 something happened," Mendez pressed. "Yes. And you didn't think to mention that during your initial statement." "I did. The officers didn't take it seriously." Mendez studied him. Sleep deprivation could cause hallucinations. Stress could trigger dissociation. But the footage didn't lie. "Walk me through the first time you noticed something strange." Daniel rubbed his temples. "I kept waking up at 2:17. Every night. Then the camera caught the shadow. Then the angle changed. Then I found the attic camera. The one not connected to your system." "Yes. Forensics hasn't found any fingerprints on it yet." Daniel looked up slowly. "Because it wasn't meant to." Silence settled between them. Mendez wasn't a believer in the supernatural. But she was a believer in patterns. And this house had one. By late afternoon, the medical examiner confirmed what they already suspected. Thomas Ashford had been dead for approximately 6 to 7 weeks. Blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. The body had been carefully positioned between studs in the basement wall. Wrapped in heavy plastic. Sealed with insulation. Whoever had done it knew the layout of the house. And had time. The estimated time of death placed the murder around the same week Daniel finalized the purchase. Which meant one of two things. Either Thomas was killed before the sale, and someone staged the transfer. Or Thomas was alive when he signed those papers, and was killed afterward. Detective Mendez returned to the Ashford house that evening. She stood alone in the living room. It felt wrong. Not haunted. Not eerie in a cinematic way. Just heavy. Like the air carried static. She glanced at the staircase leading up. Then at the basement door. 2:16 a.m. She checked her watch. She didn't believe in coincidences. But she did believe in observation. The department had left Daniel's security system active. Mendez wanted to see what it would record without him inside. 2:17 a.m. The phone in her hand buzzed. Motion detected. Living room. Her pulse ticked upward. She didn't move. The room around her was still. She opened the app. The live feed showed her standing exactly where she was. But behind her, a second figure. Taller. Standing near the staircase. Her heart thudded. She spun around. Nothing. Empty air. When she looked back at the screen, the figure remained. It wasn't transparent. It wasn't shadowy. It was solid. The face was blurred by distortion, but the build was unmistakable. Male. Broad shoulders. Watching her, the figure raised one arm slowly, pointed toward the basement door. The live feed cut out. 37 seconds. Mendez did not tell her colleagues what she had seen. Instead, she went downstairs. The basement light flickered on. The hole in the drywall remained open where Thomas Ashford's body had been removed. Plastic sheeting still lined the floor. She stepped closer. The insulation inside the wall cavity had been cleared for evidence processing. But deeper inside, she noticed something the technicians had missed. Another narrow space. Behind the first cavity, as if the wall had been modified, Mendez crouched down, shined her flashlight inside. The beam caught something metallic. A small latch, attached to wood. Her stomach tightened. She pulled. The panel shifted. And behind it was a crawl space. Not part of the original blueprints. Large enough for a person to fit. And inside that crawl space were items that did not belong to Thomas Ashford. Food wrappers, water bottles, a blanket, a portable battery pack, and mounted against the interior beam, a second hidden camera, pointed outward, toward the basement. Someone had been living inside the walls. Not recently. Recently enough. The forensic team returned within the hour. The crawl space yielded hair samples, fibers, partial shoe prints, but no immediate match. No clear suspect. Daniel Harper, meanwhile, was still the prime focus. His fingerprints were on the tarp seen in the footage. His phone location placed him inside the house at the estimated time the body was concealed. But there was a problem. Cell tower data also showed his phone active across town during part of that same window, at the motel, which meant either the timestamps were wrong, or someone else had his phone. Oh, someone had altered the footage. When Daniel finally asked for a lawyer, it wasn't because he feared conviction. It was because he feared something else entirely. You found it, didn't you? He asked Mendez quietly before being escorted away. Found what? The space inside the walls. She didn't answer. His eyes filled, not with guilt, with relief. I told you, he whispered. I wasn't alone. 3 more houses on Waverly Lane would soon come under investigation, each one previously owned by someone who had moved out abruptly. Each one reporting unexplained activity at 2:17 a.m. And in 2 of those houses, small, sealed modifications were discovered inside interior walls. Empty now, but once occupied. The pattern was becoming undeniable. Someone had been moving between homes, watching, waiting for the right moment. And the security footage? The distortions? The impossible angles? Forensics would later confirm something chilling. Several of the 2:17 a.m. recordings had been accessed remotely, from inside the Ashford house, but not from Daniel's devices, from a signal that originated within the walls. As Detective Mendez drove home that night, she couldn't shake one question. Had Thomas Ashford discovered the man inside his walls, or had the man inside the walls discovered him first? And more importantly, where was he now? Because at 2:17 a.m. that same night, across town, a new homeowner on Birch Hollow Drive received a notification. Motion detected, living room. The camera feed flickered. A tall silhouette stood near the staircase, watching, learning the layout, waiting. By the end of the week, Waverly Lane was no longer a quiet suburban street. Satellite vans lined the curb. Reporters stood in clusters beneath maple trees that had not yet begun to lose their leaves. Headlines moved faster than facts. Body found inside basement wall. New homeowner arrested. Police investigate possible serial trespasser. But Detective Laura Mendez wasn't focused on headlines. She was focused on addresses. Ashford's house was not the only one. 2 doors down, 114, Waverly Lane had sold 3 years earlier under similar circumstances. Below market value, no open house, expedited closing. The buyer, a retired teacher named Carol Whitman, had lived there for 4 months. Then she left. No explanation. Neighbors assumed health issues. They were wrong. Carol Whitman sat across from Mendez in a softly lit interview room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. I didn't tell anyone, Carol said quietly, because I knew how it would sound. Tell me anyway, Mendez replied. Carol hesitated. Every night at 2:17, something moved in my house. Mendez did not react. Did you install cameras? Yes. Did you catch anything? Carol swallowed. Yes. She slid her phone across the table. The footage was old. Grainy. Lower resolution. Timestamp, 2:17 and 11 seconds a.m. A shadow stretched across her living room wall. But unlike Daniel's footage, this figure was clearer. Solid. Male. It walked directly toward the camera, then leaned down, and smiled. The screen glitched violently. Carol's voice trembled. I called the police back then. They said it was interference. Did you ever find signs of entry? No. Did you check your walls? Carol's eyes flickered. There was a smell. In the guest bedroom. I thought it was old insulation. Did you open it? No. I moved out. Mendez leaned back slowly. How long after you moved did the house sell? 2 weeks. Do you know to whom? Carol shook her head. But Mendez did. The buyer had been a limited liability company formed 6 days before the purchase. The same structure used to transfer Thomas Ashford's house to Daniel Harper. Different name. Same registration address. A P.O. box in Brook Hollow. By Friday, the investigation widened. 4 houses within a 6-block radius had similar sales histories. Quick transactions. Minimal inspection reports. Buyers who left suddenly. And always, the 2:17 disturbances. Detective Mendez assembled a timeline across her office wall. Names. Dates. Move in. Move out. Missing persons. She circled one name in red. Ethan Rowe. Lived at 122 Waverly Lane 5 years earlier. Reported missing after neighbors noticed his car hadn't moved for a week. No body was ever found. His house had sold within a month. To another LLC. That property later transferred again. And again. Ownership rotating through shell companies. Each time landing with an unsuspecting buyer. Each time ending abruptly. Mendez tapped the timeline with her pen. It's not random, she murmured. Daniel Harper remained in custody. The district attorney was hesitant to press formal charges without more physical evidence tying him directly to the concealment of Thomas Ashford's body. But the footage of Daniel carrying the torp at 2:17 a.m. was difficult to ignore. Mendez requested a deeper forensic review of the recordings. What they found unsettled everyone. The video metadata had inconsistencies. Timestamps overlapping. Frame sequences slightly out of order. And embedded within the corrupted frames. Tiny, nearly invisible data packets. Manual insertions. Someone had edited the footage. Not from outside the network, but from a device connected internally. The signal path matched the crawlspace router they discovered hidden inside the Ashford basement walls. Which meant whoever had been living inside that crawlspace had access to Daniel's security system, and knew how to manipulate it. Mendez visited the Birch Hollow address that had triggered a 2:17 alert 2 nights earlier. The new homeowner, a young couple named Tyler and Megan Brooks, answered the door. They looked nervous. Has anything unusual happened in your house? Mendez asked gently. Tyler exchanged a glance with Megan. How would you define unusual? Strange noises. Motion alerts at the same time every night. Megan's face went pale. You're kidding. No. Tyler stepped aside. You need to see this. Inside their living room, mounted above the front door, was a brand new smart camera. Megan opened the app, scrolled to 2 nights ago, 2:17 a.m. The feed showed their empty couch. Then, a shadow emerged near the staircase. The same posture, the same height, the same deliberate stillness. Mendez felt her pulse rise. Has anyone else had access to your home? No. Have you done renovations? Not yet. Have you checked your walls? They hadn't. Not until that afternoon. After watching Daniel Harper's story on the news. Tyler led her to the hallway closet. Behind hanging coats, a faint draft brushed against Mendez's hand. She pressed against the drywall. It flexed slightly. Not original construction. Not solid. She turned to Tyler. You need to step outside. Within hours, officers carefully removed the closet paneling. Behind it, another crawlspace, larger than the one in the Ashford house. Empty, but recently vacated. Blanket indentations remained in the insulation. A water bottle half full. still cool, and mounted near the entry. A battery-powered router. Its signal active. Detectives traced the network history. It had connected to Daniel Harper's home 3 weeks earlier, and to 2 other Waverly Lane addresses before that. The pattern was no longer theoretical. It was mobile. Whoever had been living inside the walls moved between houses, targeted homes that were newly sold, installed hidden crawl spaces during brief vacancy windows, and waited, watching, studying routines, testing camera angles, manipulating footage, and at 2:17 a.m., revealing himself. The break came from an unexpected place. A retired contractor named Walter Griggs recognized something in the news footage. Specifically, the framing of the hidden crawl spaces. "It's not amateur," he told police. "Whoever built those new structural layouts." "Could you do it?" Mendez asked. "Not without blueprints." "Where would someone get those?" "City archives, or from someone who worked on the houses originally." Most of the Waverly Lane homes were built by the same developer in the late 1990s, a company that no longer existed, but one of its former site managers was still alive, and still local. His name was Raymond Keene. When officers knocked on his apartment door, no one answered. But the smell did. Inside, they found stacks of blueprints. Marked, annotated, highlighted crawl spaces, ventilation paths, wall cavities, and a series of handwritten notes repeating the same time over and over. 217, 217, 217. Raymond Keene had died 3 days earlier. Natural causes, 72 years old. But forensic analysis of the crawl spaces told a different story. The food wrappers were recent. The battery packs newly charged. The shoe prints consistent with a man in his 30s or 40s. Raymond Keene had designed the spaces, but he hadn't been the one living in them. Someone else had inherited the blueprint. Someone younger, stronger, still active, still moving. At 2:17 a.m. that Sunday, every officer assigned to the case sat watching live feeds from houses across Brook Hollow. 23 homes. All connected. All monitored. The town held its breath. 2:17. For 16 seconds, nothing happened. Then 3 cameras flickered simultaneously. Ashford's house, Birch Hollow, and 122, Waverly Lane. On all 3 feeds, the same silhouette appeared, standing near the staircase, perfectly still, as if daring them to find him. Mendez stared at the screen. "Triangulate the signal," she ordered. Tech analysts scrambled. The signal bounced across internal Reuters. Masked, rerouted. But one ping stood out. A live transmission. From within a half-mile radius. Not inside a house. Inside a vehicle. Parked. Engine off. Hidden in the shadow of a vacant construction lot. Officers moved fast, surrounding the vehicle silently. Weapons drawn. Mendez approached the driver's side. Tapped the window. Inside sat a man in his late 30s. Calm. Watching multiple live security feeds on a laptop, including hers. He smiled slowly, as if he'd been expecting her. On the passenger seat beside him were blueprints of another neighborhood, unmarked, untouched. For now, his name was Jonah Keene, grandson of Raymond Keene, former electrical engineer, expert in network penetration and structural systems, and as they would later uncover, he had been inside the Ashford house the night Thomas died, watching. But whether he had killed Thomas, or merely observed, was a question that would fracture the case. Because as Jonah was handcuffed, he said something that made Detective Mendez pause. "You still think I'm the only one?" And at that exact moment, back in the Ashford house, a final 2:17 notification appeared. Motion detected, living room. Even though every known signal had just been cut, and every suspect was in custody, Jonah Keene was in handcuffs when the alert came through. 2:17 a.m. Ashford house, living room motion detected. Every device linked to Jonah's laptop had just been disconnected. His vehicle's hotspot was offline. The battery packs seized. The Reuters bagged as evidence. There should have been silence. Instead, the screen in the surveillance van flickered. Detective Laura Mendez stared at it. The living room of the Ashford house appeared as it had dozens of times before. Empty couch, staircase to the right, front door to the left. Then the distortion began. Static crawled across the bottom of the feed like ants. The timestamp blinked. 2 hours 17 minutes and 3 seconds. A silhouette formed near the staircase. Not grainy. Not glitched. Solid. And closer than ever before. Boost audio, Mendez ordered. The tech adjusted levels. A low scraping sound filled the van's speakers. Like wood against wood. Like something dragging inside the walls. Jonah leaned back against the patrol car where he was being searched. He couldn't see the van's screen, but he didn't need to. "You found one nest," he called calmly. "Not the hive." Mendez's jaw tightened. On the screen, the figure tilted its head slightly, almost inquisitive. Then it stepped forward, closer to the camera. The image sharpened. For the first time, they could make out facial features. And the face was not Jonah's. Inside the van, silence thickened. The man on the feed looked older. Late 40s. Unshaven. Eyes sunken but alert. He wasn't blurred by interference. He wasn't transparent. He was real. And he was inside a house that had just been cleared by a tactical team. "Units inside Ashford, report." Mendez barked into her radio. Static crackled. "House is clear," came the reply. No movement. Mendez looked back at the live feed. The man's gaze shifted, directly into the camera lens. As if he could hear them. Then he raised one finger. Pressed it to his lips. The feed cut. 37 seconds. Exactly. They tore through the Ashford house again. Walls tapped. Floors lifted. Attic insulation scattered. Nothing. No footprints. No open panels. No displaced dust. The house was empty. But the crawlspace router they had removed earlier was not the only network device discovered that night. Hidden behind a kitchen outlet, so small it blended into the wiring, was a microtransmitter. Hardwired. Older than Jonah's equipment. Much older. Forensic dating would later place its installation roughly 6 years prior. Before Daniel Harper. Before Thomas Ashford. Before Carol Whitman. Someone had been preparing these houses long before Jonah Keene started occupying them. Jonah was not the origin. He was a successor. Back at the station, Jonah Keene sat calmly across from Mendez. "You saw him," he said. "We saw someone," she corrected. Jonah's smile was thin. "He doesn't like being watched." "Who is he?" "You wouldn't believe me." "Try me." Jonah leaned forward slightly. "My grandfather didn't design those crawl spaces for me." Mendez didn't interrupt. He designed them for someone else. "Who?" Jonah hesitated for the first time. "We never knew his real name. My grandfather called him the tenant." The room felt smaller. "He showed up during the original construction phase in the late 90s, Jonah continued. "Paid in cash. Asked for modifications. Ventilation shafts. Access points. Blind spots in security layouts. And your grandfather just agreed. He said the money was good." "Did he ever see his face?" Jonah shook his head slowly. "Not clearly." Mendez watched him carefully. "You're telling me someone has been living inside suburban homes for decades?" "Not living," Jonah corrected softly. "Rotating." The pattern deepened. Records showed subtle but consistent property modifications across multiple developments built by Raymond Keene's company. Hidden panels. Non-standard stud spacing. Unexplained crawl spaces in interior walls. Always small. Always concealed. And always near staircases or high-traffic areas. Designed for visibility. Designed for observation. Jonah admitted he had discovered the old blueprints after his grandfather's stroke 5 years earlier. "I thought it was brilliant," he said. "A ghost system. No one checks inside finished walls." "So you started using them?" "Yes." "For what?" "To watch." "Why?" Jonah's answer was immediate. Because someone was already watching. Digital forensics confirmed something unsettling. Some of the 217 footage predated Jonah's involvement entirely. Archived clips from Carol Whitman's old camera showed metadata signatures that did not match Jonah's hardware. The second signal, the older transmitter, had been active long before Jonah began tapping into networks. Which meant 2 separate operators had been inside these systems. At different times. Possibly overlapping. The hive wasn't metaphorical. It was layered. At 2:17 a.m. the following night, The task force ran a full-spectrum sweep across Brook Hollow. Every frequency, every rogue signal, every hidden network. At exactly 2:17, a ping emerged. Not from Ashford, not from Birch Hollow, from a house that had never reported disturbances. 147 Cedar Ridge, owned by a family of 4. No prior incidents, no rapid resale history, no known crawl spaces. The signal lasted 37 seconds, then vanished. Mendez didn't hesitate. Move. Cedar Ridge looked like every other suburban home in the neighborhood. Porch light on, car in the driveway, curtains drawn. The homeowners answered the door in pajamas, confused and alarmed. "We need to check your interior walls," Mendez said carefully. The father blinked. "Our walls?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because someone may be inside them." The silence that followed was suffocating. They checked the basement first. Nothing unusual. Then the hallway closet. Solid. Then the upstairs guest room. A faint draft. Mendez pressed her palm against the drywall. It shifted slightly. Her stomach dropped. Officers moved quickly. The panel came down. And behind it was not a crawl space. It was a corridor. Narrow. Wood-lined. Extending between 2 studs and then turning sharply, as if connecting to another section of the house. A low hum vibrated faintly through the wood. "Electric. Active. Thermal scan," Mendez ordered. The device lit up. A heat signature pulsed at the far end of the corridor. Human-sized. Moving. "Police," she shouted. "Come out now." The heat signature paused, then began retreating. Faster. Boots hit insulation. Wood creaked. "He's moving toward the stairwell," an officer yelled. But when they burst into the hallway, there was no one there. No open doors. No broken panels. Just the faint echo of something shifting behind the walls. And then, silence. At 2:17 and 37 seconds a.m. Exactly. Later, reviewing bodycam footage, analysts noticed something chilling. As officers entered the Cedar Ridge hallway, a second figure stood behind them, visible only for 3 frames. Watching. Not retreating. Not hiding. Observing. 2 operators. 2 patterns. 1 legacy. Jonah Keene was charged with unlawful surveillance, network intrusion, and accessory to concealment of a body pending further investigation. But he wasn't charged with murder, because Thomas Ashford's autopsy revealed something unexpected. The fatal blow to his skull was delivered from behind, at close range, while kneeling, as if he had been looking into a wall cavity, as if he had discovered something, or someone, and the angle of impact did not match Jonah's height. As dawn broke over Brook Hollow, Detective Mendez stood in the Cedar Ridge hallway staring at the repaired drywall. The house was quiet. The family had been relocated for safety. But Mendez knew one thing with certainty now. Jonah Keene had been watching. But someone else had been hunting. And somewhere within the maze of hidden corridors woven into suburban walls, the original tenant was still moving, still adapting, still choosing houses, still selecting owners, waiting for the right moment. At 2:17 a.m., by Monday morning, Brook Hollow no longer felt like a town. It felt like a blueprint. Every house suspect. Every wall a question mark. Every creak after midnight a warning. Detective Laura Mendez stood inside the city planning archive room, staring at microfilm records from 1997. Blueprint after blueprint slid across the illuminated table. Cedar Ridge Development. Waverly Lane Phase 1. Birch Hollow Estates. Different street names. Different buyers. Same structural signature. Subtle deviations in interior wall framing. Non-standard cavities. Vent paths that led nowhere. Access points hidden behind closets or utility panels. The modifications weren't random. They were systematic. And they weren't added after construction. They were built in. Raymond Keene had been the site manager. But he wasn't the architect. The original architectural firm listed on the permits had dissolved 2 decades ago. However, one name kept appearing in early drafts before final submission revisions. A consultant, uncredited in final plans. Elias Mercer. Mendez repeated the name softly. There were no criminal records under it. No recent driver's license. No social security activity in the past 15 years. But in older property tax documents, she found something curious. A vacant property purchased in 1995 under the name Elias Mercer. Cash. No mortgage. Sold 2 years later to the development company building Waverly Lane. The land became Phase 1. The first houses with hidden cavities. The foundation of the hive. Jonah Keene listened carefully when Mendez mentioned the name. Elias Mercer. He went still. My grandfather talked about him, Jonah said quietly. Tell me. He said Mercer never wanted to be credited. Didn't care about recognition. Just control over structural flow. Structural flow. Sight lines. Sound travel. Vent placement. He designed houses like surveillance chambers. Mendez felt a cold thread run down her spine. Did your grandfather ever describe him? Jonah hesitated. Tall. Thin. Soft-spoken. Always wore gloves. Why gloves? He said Mercer didn't like leaving fingerprints. A deeper search into construction payroll records uncovered something even more unsettling. Elias Mercer had never been formally employed by the development company, but he had access badges logged during after-hours site visits. Dozens of them, mostly between midnight and 3 a.m. Especially 2:17 a.m. Mendez tapped the timestamp column repeatedly. Why that time? She murmured. Jonah gave a faint shrug. My grandfather used to say Mercer believed houses had quiet hours. He said 2:17 was when structural settling stopped. That's not how physics works. Jonah's eyes flickered. I know. Forensic teams re-examined older homes from the first development phase. Not just Waverly Lane, but neighboring districts built during the same 2-year window. 3 additional houses revealed dormant corridor systems. Empty. Unused. Waiting. But in one house, an abandoned foreclosure on Maple Crest Drive, they found something different. Dust patterns disturbed. Recent footprints. Food supplies no more than 2 weeks old. A sleeping mat folded neatly in a wall cavity, and pinned to the wood beam with a small brass tack. A photograph. Thomas Ashford, standing in his own kitchen, unaware he was being watched. The photo had been taken from above. From the attic vent. The timestamp printed on the corner. 2:17 a.m. Mendez stared at the image for a long time. This wasn't impulsive voyeurism. This wasn't thrill-seeking trespass. This was architectural stalking. Planned. Refined. Decades in the making. The architect of silence wasn't drifting between houses randomly. He was following developments he had helped design, revisiting his own work, maintaining it, upgrading it, and selecting occupants with care. Single homeowners. People living alone. Recent movers. Individuals without strong local support systems. Daniel Harper fit that pattern perfectly. Thomas Ashford did too. So had Ethan Rowe. So had Carol Whitman. Isolation was the entry point. By Wednesday night, the task force mapped every Mercerlink property within a 50-mile radius. 32 homes. 26 still occupied. 6 vacant. Every one built between 1997 and 1999. And at exactly 2:17 a.m., they ran coordinated surveillance across all 32. The feeds lit up. Most remained still. But 5 flickered. In unison. On Maple Crest. Cedar Ridge. Waverly Lane. Birch Hollow. And a house no one had flagged before. 318, Hollow Bridge Court. The feed from Hollow Bridge showed something unmistakable. A tall, thin man stepping out of a hallway closet. He moved calmly, confidently, like someone walking through his own home. He paused beneath the camera, looked up, and smiled. No distortion. No static. Clear. Real. Detective Mendez felt something shift inside her. Trace it, she ordered. The signal didn't bounce like Jonah's had. It didn't mask. It didn't reroute. It stayed steady, as if daring them. Location locked. Hollow Bridge Court. Unit 318. Occupied by a widower named Samuel Trent. 70 years old. Living alone. Police arrived in under 6 minutes. Lights off. Perimeter secured. Mendez approached the front door quietly. She knocked once. No answer. She knocked again. Still silence. Then, a sound from inside. Soft, measured footsteps. Not hurried. Not panicked. The door opened slowly. Samuel Trent stood there, confused, half asleep. What's going on? Is anyone else in the house? Mendez asked. No. She stepped past him without waiting. Officers moved through the living room. Kitchen. Basement. Clear. Then upstairs. The hallway closet door stood slightly ajar. Mendez pushed it open. Behind the hanging coats. A seam in the drywall. Fresh. Intentional. She pulled. The panel swung inward silently. And inside the narrow corridor, a man stood waiting. Tall. Thin. Late 50s or early 60s. Wearing gloves. Calm eyes. Not surprised. He tilted his head slightly. You're early, he said. His voice was almost gentle. Officers shouted commands. Weapons drawn. But he didn't resist. He stepped forward slowly. Hands raised. No attempt to flee. No visible fear. As they cuffed him, Mendez asked the only question that mattered. Are you Elias Mercer? He smiled faintly. That name belongs to the plans. What's your real name? He considered that. Does it matter? Inside the corridor, officers discovered a compact control station. Battery arrays. Signal Reuters. Camera feeds from multiple houses. And a small notebook. Inside it, dates, addresses, times. Always the same. 217. Written hundreds of times. In meticulous handwriting. When questioned at the station, the man did not deny constructing the corridors. He did not deny entering homes. He did not deny watching. But when asked about Thomas Ashford, he paused for the first time. I warned him, he said quietly. Warned him about what? Some walls shouldn't be opened. Did you kill him? Silence stretched long enough to feel like an answer. Then, I maintain the architecture, he replied. I don't disrupt it. Who does? The faintest smile returned. You've already met him. Mendez felt the room tilt slightly. Jonah Keane had claimed he wasn't alone. Bodycam footage had shown a second figure. The architect of silence had been caught. But something else had been moving through the walls too. And unlike Mercer, that presence had fled. At 2:17 a.m. that night, every Mercer-linked signal went dark. Every corridor silent. Every crawl space empty. Except one. Ashford House. The original. The first Phase 1 build. The place where Thomas Ashford had died. One camera flickered back to life. No Reuters connected. No visible network source. Just static. Then, a shadow crossed the living room. Taller than Mercer. Broader than Jonah. Slower. The figure paused near the staircase. Turned toward the camera. And spoke clearly into the microphone. You fixed the wrong leak. The feed cut. 37 seconds. Detective Laura Mendez stared at the blank screen. Elias Mercer was in custody. Jonah Keane was in custody. But something, or someone, was still inside the original house. And this time, it wasn't hiding. The Ashford house was supposed to be quiet now. Elias Mercer was in custody. Jonah Keane was in custody. Every known transmitter had been removed. Every crawlspace mapped. And yet, at 2:17 a.m., the living room camera had turned itself back on. No external signal. No router handshake. No identifiable IP address. Just static. Then a shadow. And a voice. You fixed the wrong leak. Detective Laura Mendez replayed the footage for the 15th time. The voice was distorted but deeper than Mercer's. Broader. Slower. Confident. Not panicked. Not improvising. Whoever had spoken knew the network was compromised. Knew Mercer was caught. Knew the surveillance was active. And still chose to appear. That wasn't fear. That was control. Forensics confirmed something impossible. The camera feed had not been transmitted through any conventional network. It hadn't traveled through Wi-Fi, cellular, or hardline connection. Instead, it appeared to originate directly from the device's onboard memory, activated internally. As if the camera had been pre-programmed long ago to record at 2:17 a.m., regardless of connectivity, regardless of interference, regardless of arrest. Mendez stared at the wiring schematic. There was no such feature in the manufacturer's design. Unless someone had modified the firmware before installation. She checked purchase records. Daniel Harper had bought the security system new. But the serial numbers didn't match factory logs. They matched a batch installed in homes during initial construction in 1998. The camera wasn't new. It had been swapped. At some point. Before Daniel moved in. Possibly before Thomas Ashford. Possibly before Carol Whitman. Possibly decades earlier. They tore apart the Ashford house again. Not walls this time. Foundation. Concrete was drilled carefully beneath the basement slab. Ground-penetrating radar scanned below the footings. And beneath the original foundation, beneath the house entirely, they found something. A void. Roughly 6 feet deep. 8 feet wide. Not part of any city blueprint. Not recorded in permits. An underground chamber. Predating the development. Mendez stood over the opening as workers broke through the concrete slab. Dust filled the air, and a cold draft rose from below. Old air. Stale. Trapped. They lowered a camera first. The image flickered, then steadied. The chamber walls were reinforced with treated wood. A narrow cot sat against one side. Shelves lined another wall. On them, batteries, notebooks, old camera components, and stacks of photographs. Hundreds of them, each labeled carefully. Address, date, 2:17 a.m. Elias Mercer stared at the photographs when they showed him copies. His calm expression fractured for the first time. That wasn't part of the design, he whispered. You built the corridors, Mendez said. Yes. You modified framing. Yes. You created blind spots. Yes. But this, she pressed, sliding a photo across the table. You didn't build this. Mercer's eyes remained fixed on the image. No. Then who did? His silence stretched long enough to become an admission of ignorance. I thought I was expanding on someone else's idea, he said finally. Mendez leaned forward slowly. Someone else. Mercer's jaw tightened. The foundation was already altered when we broke ground. City excavation records confirmed it. During early development in 1997, workers had reported a minor sinkhole beneath Lot 12. The issue was marked as stabilized. No further documentation. Lot 12 became 112, Waverly Lane. The Ashford House. The first Phase 1 build. Which meant the underground chamber predated Mercer's involvement. Predated Raymond Keene. Predated the development entirely. Someone had been beneath that land, before the neighborhood existed. Inside the chamber, investigators found something that changed the case entirely. A journal. Leather-bound. Old. Dated entries going back to 1989. Nearly a decade before construction. The handwriting was steady. Meticulous. The earliest entries described sound mapping. Observation cycles. Structural rhythm. Then, later, new owners. Fresh walls. Better acoustics. Mendez read the final completed entry aloud in the evidence room. The house above me will change, but the foundation remains mine. Signed. Just an initial. Ah. Jonah Keene listened carefully when told about the underground chamber. His expression shifted from curiosity to unease. My grandfather mentioned a man who lived nearby before development, he said slowly. Name. Richard Haldane. Records showed Haldane had owned rural property in that exact area in the late 1980s. He disappeared in 1996. No body recovered. The land was sold posthumously to the development company. If Haldane had built the underground chamber, he had done so while the land was still isolated farmland. Before suburban expansion. Before neighbors. Before surveillance systems. And when the houses were constructed above his chamber, he didn't leave. He adapted. Mercer built corridors in the walls. Haldane had built something deeper, a root system. The final forensic breakthrough came from soil analysis. Microscopic traces of concrete dust found on Thomas Ashford's clothing matched the original foundation mix used in 1997. Not the interior walls. Not Mercer's corridors. The foundation slab. Thomas hadn't been kneeling in front of a wall when he was struck. He had been kneeling on the basement floor, looking down. At a seam. At a hairline crack, where air rose faintly from beneath. He hadn't discovered the man in the walls. He had discovered the man under the house. At 2:17 a.m. the next night, officers sealed off the Ashford property entirely. Ground sensors. Thermal imaging. Perimeter units. They waited. The air felt heavier, like the house was holding tension. 2:17. Nothing in the living room. Nothing in the attic. But beneath the basement slab, a faint heat signature flickered. Moving. Slow. Alive. Mendez felt her pulse steady into something colder than fear. Resolve. They had chased shadows through walls. Chased signals through Reuters. Chased architects through blueprints. But the original foundation had never left. It had only been waiting. Waiting for the right leak to fix. The right wall to open. The right homeowner to kneel. And at exactly 2 hours, 17 minutes, and 14 seconds, the concrete beneath the basement emitted a soft cracking sound. Not from impact. From pressure. From below. And somewhere inside the underground chamber, a light switched on. Detective Laura Mendez stood at the edge of the basement opening, staring down into the darkness. The underground chamber beneath the Ashford house had been sealed for decades. Its air was heavy with dust, damp wood, and something older, something patient. The forensic team had rigged a temporary ladder and lighting system. Cameras were lowered first, then microphones, then finally Mendez herself, slowly descending into the hidden chamber. The moment her boots touched the floor, she felt it, a subtle vibration, almost like the house itself was breathing. The chamber was small, but meticulously organized. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with notebooks, photos, and rudimentary surveillance devices. The air smelled faintly of metal and aged paper. She knelt, shining her flashlight across the floor. Footprints. Human-sized. Barefoot. Not recent, but still present. She shivered. Whoever had been here had moved silently, never leaving traces outside the chamber. She lifted one of the old notebooks. The handwriting was consistent, neat, precise. Page after page detailed the houses above, their owners, and a repeating schedule. 2:17 a.m. Observe, adjust, record. Then she noticed a new entry, written in a different hand. Hasty, jagged. He is awake. Approaching the seam. The seam. Her mind connected the dots instantly. Thomas Ashford hadn't been randomly kneeling on the basement floor. He had discovered a hairline crack, an entrance into the original chamber. Mendez scanned the chamber for a sign of the current occupant. A faint shimmer on the floor caught her eye, dust disturbed in a pattern too deliberate to be natural. She followed it to a corner. There, hidden under a loose panel in the wall, was a small device, a thermal sensor, still powered. The readings showed movement. Alive. Below. Mendez signaled her team to set up an emergency extraction protocol. Above ground, officers secured the Ashford house perimeter. The plan was to contain the underground chamber and capture whoever remained. Mendez descended further, flashlight sweeping across narrow corridors. The walls of the chamber were reinforced wood and concrete, with small ventilation shafts connecting to the basements above. It was a labyrinth. Every corridor had been meticulously designed, not for escape, but for observation. She reached a junction, 3 narrow tunnels branching from the main chamber. The heat sensor indicated movement in the leftmost passage. Cautiously, she approached. At the end of the passage was a hatch, metal, flush with the floor, almost invisible. Mendez's heart raced. The air grew warmer as she knelt and pried it open. Inside, the figure crouched, a man. Tall, broad-shouldered, covered in dirt and dust. Eyes sharp, calculating. He didn't flinch. Didn't panic. "You shouldn't have come down here," he said, voice calm but commanding. "I have questions," Mendez said. He tilted his head, almost amused. "I imagine you do. But questions can wait. Observation never does." The man rose. He was massive, yet moved with a predator's grace. Every step seemed rehearsed, silent. Mendez realized with chilling clarity, this was the original tenant. The architect of the underground system. The presence that had been observing the homes for decades. Not Mercer. Not Jonah. Not any of the others. He had always been here. The man spoke again, softer this time. "Your cameras, your Reuters, your investigators, they are all temporary. They come and go. I remain." Mendez drew her weapon. "You killed Thomas Ashford." He shook his head slowly. "I didn't kill him. He discovered too much. He frightened himself more than anyone." "Explain the tunnels. The crawl spaces. The cameras." He smiled faintly. "I design observation points. I measure. I study. I wait. 217 is a rhythm. Houses settle. People move. Secrets are revealed if you know where to look. Mendez took a deep breath. Why now? Because the house changes. New walls, new owners. But the foundation remembers. Above ground, the team prepared to breach the chamber fully. The man's calm demeanor below was a warning. He was not trapped. He had options. Mendez moved slowly toward him. Every step measured. She couldn't underestimate him, not after decades of careful preparation. Then he paused at the end of the tunnel, near a secondary hatch. Do you see it? He asked, pointing. She followed his gaze. Another passage, narrow, leading even deeper, underground, beneath the foundation. The original foundation, he said. And you live down there? She asked. I don't live, he corrected. I endure. I observe. I correct. Mendez realized that even if they captured him now, the network he had built, the hidden corridors, the surveillance points, the underground chamber, was more than a house. It was a system that would survive him. And at 2:17 a.m., Mendez realized the pattern would continue. The tenant was patient, immortal in his methods, and somewhere beneath the slab of Ashford House, he was still watching. The Ashford House sat silent now, or at least it appeared so. Detective Laura Mendez stepped back onto the first floor, her boots heavy on the creaking hardwood. Every hallway, every staircase, every corner seemed to hum with memory, footsteps that weren't hers, whispers she couldn't place. The tenant's presence lingered, even though the underground chamber had been secured. It was more than just the man. It was the house itself. Forensic teams combed through the crawl spaces and hidden corridors once more. Dust samples, fingerprints, hair fibers, and micro traces of clothing fibers were collected. Every opening was sealed. Every access point mapped. And yet, the reports kept coming. 2:17 a.m. motion alerts on cameras that had no network connection. Doors creaking. Shadows flitting past cameras. Voices barely audible on recordings. Even with Jonah Keane and Elias Mercer in custody, the pattern persisted. It was as if the walls themselves remembered. Mendez gathered her team in the living room. This isn't about who built the walls anymore, she said. It's about the architecture itself. The tenant's design, it's alive in a sense. Or at least, it behaves as if it is. One of the tech analysts, a young man named Harris, looked uneasy. Detective, we ran diagnostics. The cameras, the sensors, even the Reuters, everything is offline. No external signals. Yet, motion triggers continue. Thermal imaging picks up movement. And forensics, he paused. Even the dust patterns suggest someone is moving inside the walls. Mendez frowned. Meaning either someone is still in the house, hiding perfectly, or the system itself is creating false positives. Mendez didn't flinch. Then we find him, or them. That night, she stationed herself alone in the living room, armed with only a flashlight and her service weapon. 2:17 a.m. The air grew heavy. A soft creak from the staircase. Nothing visible. A shadow stretched along the wall. But when she moved, it shifted in impossible ways. She froze. A whisper echoed from the ceiling vent. Why are you here? Mendez spun, flashlight cutting through darkness. Nothing. Then from behind the living room wall, a faint tapping. Slow. Deliberate. Measured. She pressed her ear to the wall. It was a voice. Not talking, but murmuring numbers. Times. Addresses. Notes. She stepped back, heart pounding. The walls weren't empty. They never had been. Meanwhile, at the police station, Jonah Keane sat quietly, reviewing the surveillance feeds that had been seized. He noticed something. The motion alerts were consistent, not random, and each one happened exactly 37 seconds after 2:17 a.m. A pattern within a pattern. 37 seconds, he muttered. Detective Mendez, who had been watching over his shoulder, stiffened. That's the same interval from Thomas Ashford's footage, she said softly. The same as every 2:17 anomaly. Jonah nodded. He's teaching the system, training it. The tenant isn't just observing anymore. He's imprinting behavior. Mendez swallowed hard. Meaning he doesn't have to be there to watch. The walls do it for him. Echoes. Memories. Residual movements. Anything you open, anything you touch, they leave traces. And he can read them. Mendez shivered. The house wasn't just a house. It was a memory, a machine, a trap, and every new owner unknowingly became a participant. The following morning, a neighbor reported strange occurrences at 114 Waverly Lane, Carol Whitman's old home. Faint footsteps in the hallway. Objects slightly moved. A cold draft that followed no logical path. Mendez returned to the home herself. She examined the walls. No crawl spaces. No hidden panels. Yet the thermal scanner picked up intermittent movement. A flashlight caught something else, a subtle indentation in the wallpaper. A mark, almost imperceptible. She pressed against it. The wall flexed slightly. A hollow space. Too narrow for a person. Yet the motion sensor activated again. A chill ran down her spine. The walls remembered. They didn't just hide the tenant. They were the tenant now. Back at Ashford, the original house, Mendez reviewed the footage from the past week. The 217 alerts across multiple homes, even those no longer connected to any network, were coordinated. Not by Jonah, not by Mercer, by the architecture itself. The system had evolved. It could detect motion, record, replay, echo, even create the illusion of presence. The tenant didn't have to be there anymore. His designs did it for him. At 2:17 a.m., across Brook Hollow, notifications pinged simultaneously on 5 different homes. No new buyers. No recent renovations. And yet, motion detected. Shadows seen. Voices heard. The same intervals. The same 37-second delay. The echoes were spreading. And Detective Mendez realized it was no longer about finding the tenant. It was about understanding how to stop the walls from watching back. Because if they couldn't, anyone who entered these homes, even briefly, would leave a trace. And the echoes would remember. Detective Laura Mendez stood in the Ashford house, surrounded by walls that had seen more than anyone could imagine. Every corner, every beam, every hidden crawl space carried decades of observation. And the system, the one the tenant had left behind, was still alive. She knew this now. It was bigger than Mercer, bigger than Jonah, bigger than any single person. The tenant's reach was embedded into the architecture itself. Jonah Keene had been quiet for days, reviewing the archived footage from multiple homes across Brook Hollow. "There's a rhythm," he said finally. "Not just 217. The way doors creak. The way floors flex. The way shadows move. It's a language. He's teaching the houses to speak." Mendez frowned. "Teaching them?" "Yes. Each house learns from the last. From disturbances. From the owners. From us. He's embedding his methods in them. Patterns. Alerts. Observations. And when a new owner moves in," she asked, "they are already part of the system." Across the city, reports multiplied. Motion alerts. Shadow sightings. Soft whispers. Doors opening and closing on their own. Objects slightly displaced. No devices. No hackers. No burglars. Just echoes. Residual memory. The tenant's imprint. It was terrifying and unstoppable. Mendez called her team for a briefing. "We've been looking for a person," she said. "But the person we're after doesn't need to be present anymore. The house remembers. The walls watch. And the moment anyone interacts with the house, they become part of his system." One officer raised a hand. "Detective, you mean the house itself is dangerous?" Mendez nodded slowly. "Dangerous doesn't even cover it. It's alive, in a way. And every new occupant, every new change in the structure, every camera installed, every inspection, feeds it, trains it, expands it." The room went silent. In her office, Mendez reviewed the original foundation chamber at Ashford. The chamber contained hundreds of photographs, surveillance notes, and journals, the tenant's original work. Each entry meticulously detailed human behavior. Every 217 observation captured someone kneeling, moving, touching, noticing, and leaving traces. The system was designed to predict, to influence, to watch, to record. And when Thomas Ashford had found the hairline crack, the tenant had known. He had ensured that someone would observe him. Jonah Keene spoke quietly in the corner. "The legacy, it's not just here. Mercer expanded it, sure. But the tenant's original design is cleverer than we imagined. The foundation isn't a hiding place, it's a control center. And every house built on that foundation carries a piece of it. Mendez realized the chilling truth. Every house, every home that used his plans, every single one. The tenant's reach spans decades, neighborhoods, entire developments. Jonah nodded. He isn't just one man anymore. He's a network, an organism, a presence embedded into homes. The final breakthrough came when a new homeowner called the precinct at 2:17 a.m. "I hear footsteps," she whispered. "But no one is home. And the doors, they creak on their own." Mendez drove immediately to the address, a house built using the same Phase 1 plans, not previously flagged. Inside, the air was unnervingly still. Every shadow seemed to stretch. Every floorboard creaked unnaturally. And then she saw it. A faint indentation along a wall, subtle, almost invisible. She pressed against it. A panel shifted. A narrow corridor. Inside, a small camera, batteries freshly replaced, still transmitting. Mendez realized the tenant's influence had already reached this home, decades later, untouched by humans. The system was self-propagating. Back at Ashford, she reviewed the journals once more. The last entries were chilling. The new homes will watch. The new owners will learn. And when I am gone, the walls will remember. 217, always 217. Mendez closed the journal. The implication was clear. The tenant was gone, but his legacy wasn't. It was the walls, the flaws, the foundations. It was the very structure of the homes themselves. And it would continue, silently, patiently, eternally. As night fell across Brook Hollow, alarms pinged simultaneously in dozens of homes. 2:17 a.m. Shadows moved. Floors creaked. Soft whispers echoed. Mendez watched from her car as lights flickered in the distance. The tenant's legacy had become something unstoppable. Something that could never be fully contained. Something alive. Watching. Waiting. Detective Laura Mendez sat alone in her car outside the Ashford house, the city lights muted behind a blanket of fog. The journal lay open on the passenger seat. Every page, every note, every observation from the tenant himself. Decades of surveillance. Decades of planning. Decades of quiet, invisible control. And tonight, she realized, with a chill settling in her chest, she might witness its final act. 2:17 a.m. The air was heavy. Every street light flickered as if on cue. The wind was still. Mendez's thermal scanner picked up movement inside the Ashford house, movement where there shouldn't be any. She watched, breath shallow. The screen showed subtle motion along the stairs. A shadow moving slowly down the hallway. She wasn't alone. Not physically. But the house itself was alive. The doors opened. No sound of handles. No human pressure. Yet the hinges groaned as if something were entering the rooms. Mendez entered the house, weapon drawn, flashlight cutting through the darkness. Every floorboard seemed to protest her steps. Every corner seemed to hold a presence. Then she saw it. A shadow flickering near the living room wall. No human form, yet the movement was deliberate. A camera, embedded in the wall, old and unassuming, swiveled slowly toward her. Its lens gleamed. Its signal pinged faintly, isolated. The tenant had left a final observation point. One last set of eyes. Watching. Recording. Judging. Mendez crouched, pressing her scanner against the wall. Thermal readings confirmed the impossibility. A human-sized heat signature, no longer tied to any human being. The walls were echoing with motion. Dust shifted as if someone, or something, was pacing inside the beams. Then came the whisper. Faint. Distorted. "You have come," it said. Mendez froze. The voice was familiar, echoing the patterns described in the journals. Calm. Patient. Confident. "I am always here," it continued. "And I will remain." She remembered Jonah Keene's words. The system learns. The walls remember. The foundations hold the original rhythm. The walls weren't hiding him. They were him. Every time an occupant entered, the house recorded. Every movement was copied, every sound catalogued. And now, Mendez understood fully. The tenant had built a legacy that could not die. It had no human anchor. No expiration. It was eternal. She moved toward the staircase cautiously, flashlight trained on every shadow. The floorboards creaked in impossible patterns, steps that weren't hers, moving in response to her own. At the top of the stairs, a loose panel shifted slightly. A hallway beyond seemed impossibly long. Her scanner picked up dozens of heat signatures, all unidentifiable. The walls were echoing themselves, replicating motion, copying presence. The tenant had made the house self-sufficient, autonomous, observant. Then, the walls began to whisper in unison. 2:17 a.m. Soft, deliberate, synchronized. Observe, watch, learn, wait. Mendez shivered. Every instinct screamed to leave. But she stayed, because she had to know. The final observation was not of a person. It was of her. Every movement, every breath, every hesitation recorded in the wall's memory. Every pattern catalogued. Every decision anticipated. She realized the tenant's work had evolved beyond vengeance, beyond curiosity. It was no longer about the houses. It was about the people. Their habits. Their secrets. Their routines. And now, she, too, was part of the system. When dawn broke, the Ashford house was quiet. The doors were locked. The walls appeared empty. The floorboards settled into silence. But Detective Laura Mendez knew better. The house had seen her. It had observed. It had learned. And somewhere, beneath the floors, behind every wall, across every home built on the tenant's original foundation, the final observation continued. Not ending. Not resting. Eternal. Watching. Waiting. 2:17 a.m. Always 2:17. Story 2. Hollow Creek was the kind of town people passed through on maps, a fog-choked stretch of rural highway tucked between crumbling forests and a river that never seemed to sleep. The town had a history of disappearances, but the locals didn't talk much about them. Not out loud. Not to strangers. Detective Evelyn Shaw pulled up in her patrol car just as the sun dipped beneath the tree line. Mist hovered low over the road, swallowing the taillights of her car in a pale, gray haze. She had been called for a missing persons report, a young man named Lucas Carter, last seen near Hollow Creek Bridge 3 nights ago. The bridge was small, wooden, and slick with moss. It spanned the narrowest part of the creek, and no one had maintained it in years. Evelyn stepped out of her car, boots crunching over gravel, and felt the fog cling to her like a second skin. No signs of struggle. No footprints. Just the faintest impression of tired tracks leading up to the bridge and stopping abruptly. The surrounding trees groaned in the wind, whispering secrets she could not yet hear. She crouched, scanning the edge of the creek. Something glinted under a cluster of reeds. A small metallic object, Lucas's watch, stopped at exactly 11:03 p.m. Evelyn felt a chill. Something wasn't right here. And she wasn't alone. From the mist, a shadow detached itself from the tree line. Small, human-like, watching. Evelyn's hand went to her sidearm. "Show yourself," she called, her voice steady despite the creeping tension. The shadow didn't move, didn't respond. Then it vanished. Evelyn's radio crackled. "Dispatch, detective, any updates?" She stared at the bridge. "I don't know yet, but something's here." The fog thickened. The creek hissed. And in the distance, across the murky water, Evelyn could have sworn she saw the faint glow of a flashlight, moving. But moving in impossible ways. Not along the path. Not along the road. But floating, as if above the ground. A silence fell. Thick, almost living. And for the first time, Evelyn understood. Hollow Creek had secrets far older than its crumbling bridge. And Lucas Carter had stumbled right into them. Detective Evelyn Shaw had seen her share of strange cases, but Hollow Creek had a way of twisting the familiar into something unrecognizable. She parked her car at the edge of the forest bordering Hollow Creek Bridge and stepped out, flashlight cutting through the thickening fog. Every step along the gravel crunching beneath her boots seemed impossibly loud, echoing like gunshots in the quiet. The first thing she noticed was the absence of sound. Not the gentle hum of insects or the rustling of leaves, but the kind of silence that smothered everything. Even the creek, normally gurgling and alive, whispered minimally, as though it, too, had been warned. She moved closer to the tree line, scanning with the flashlight. There were footprints in the soft earth, leading from the bridge and into the underbrush. They weren't fresh, maybe a day or two old, but the pattern was odd. Not the stride of someone walking normally. More like someone had been pacing, hesitating, circling back. "Dispatch," she said into her radio. "I found footprints. They lead into the woods. I'm going to follow them. There was a pause, static crackling through the earpiece. Copy, detective. Backup is on the way, but be careful, this area is isolated. Evelyn's jaw tightened. I've got it. The footprints led her deeper into the forest. Fog clung to her coat, settling on her shoulders and hair. Every snap of a branch underfoot felt like a warning. She shone the flashlight left, then right, trying to catch movement. The forest seemed to respond to her presence, the mist curling and twisting in unnatural ways. Then she saw it. A figure, or what she assumed was a figure, standing between two trees about 50 feet ahead. Motionless. Tall, thin, and pale. Evelyn froze, her breath hitching. She raised her flashlight. The figure did not move. Did not blink. Did not breathe. Hey, she called cautiously. I'm police. If you're hurt or lost, you need to come with me. No response. Her gut twisted. This was not a lost hiker. Not a jogger. Not anyone you would find wandering in Hollow Creek at night. The figure seemed anchored to the trees, as if it had always been there, observing, waiting. Evelyn took a step forward. The figure seemed to shift slightly, though she couldn't tell if it was voluntary. The fog moved differently around it, curling unnaturally, almost like it avoided touching the figure. Her pulse raced. Dispatch, I need eyes here, she whispered into her radio. I've got someone or something in the trees. Static. Then, finally, a voice. Copy, detective. Hold position until backup arrives. Evelyn's eyes didn't leave the figure. She raised her flashlight higher, trying to illuminate its face. But when the beam touched it, the figure flickered, just for a moment, like a projection out of sync with reality. Then it was gone. Her heart raced. She scanned the area frantically. Nothing. No footprints besides those she had been following. No rustle in the brush. Only fog, silent and oppressive. Then the radio crackled again, faintly. A whisper. Not her dispatcher's voice. Not human. Just a breathy sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Evelyn spun around. The fog shifted. Her flashlight picked up something moving between the trees. Fast, but not running. Gliding. Pausing. Watching. Her training screamed at her to retreat. To wait. But curiosity, professional and morbid, pushed her forward. The footprints led to a small clearing. A cluster of dead trees and rocks. And at the center, a small campsite. A fire pit, long cold, surrounded by remnants of someone's life. A tattered backpack. A pair of shoes. And a notebook, pages yellowed, left open to a page filled with careful handwriting. She approached cautiously. The notebook detailed a schedule, dates, times, and locations. Every entry referenced Hollow Creek. Every entry included the number 217. Evelyn's stomach churned. The same time she had heard in the dispatch logs when Lucas Carter was last seen. There were sketches too. Rough, almost childlike, yet precise. Maps of the forest paths. Notes on the bridge. Markings for trees, rocks, and even the creek itself. And then, scribbled at the bottom of the page, a message. He watches. Always. Follow the sound. Evelyn froze. She didn't hear anything unusual, yet she felt it. The forest was listening. Waiting. Watching her as surely as she was observing it. She stepped back toward the tree line, notebook in hand, and caught movement in the corner of her eye. There, between the trunks. A shadow. Thin. Elongated. Watching. Her pulse quickened. She raised her flashlight. The shadow flickered again. Evelyn raised her radio, but the signal was dead. The forest swallowed the sound. A soft whisper reached her ears. Not carried by wind. Not a reflection or echo. A voice, low and deliberate. You shouldn't be here. Evelyn spun. Nothing. Only fog and trees. She took a step forward, scanning. Her flashlight illuminated nothing unusual, until she reached the edge of the clearing. The creek. Water lapped against mossy rocks. And on the opposite bank, barely visible through the mist, was another figure. This one smaller. Hunched. Watching. And then vanished. Her mind raced. She thought of Lucas Carter. Disappeared 3 nights ago. Last seen near the bridge. Could it be this figure? Or something else entirely? Evelyn called the backup unit. They arrived minutes later, though in Hollow Creek, minutes could feel like hours. She briefed them quickly. The officers swept the area, shining flashlights into the fog, scanning the creek and the underbrush. Every officer reported seeing nothing, yet everyone felt it. The forest watching, the trees leaning slightly toward them, whispering against the wind. One officer, hesitant, whispered to her, "Detective, I think it's not human. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like the forest itself is alive." Evelyn nodded, trying to keep her fear under control. "We'll find him," she said firmly, though even she didn't know if that was true. Hours later, they established a perimeter and searched systematically. The creek yielded nothing. Hollow spaces in the bank, empty. Old animal burrows, empty. Footpaths, only the ones Evelyn had followed. The fog persisted, stubborn and cold. And then, near the edge of the clearing, they found something new. A single shoe. Mud-caked. Small. Male. Likely Lucas's. Next to it, a note scratched into the dirt with a stick. "He sees you." No footprints leading away. No disturbance. Just the shoe and the message. Evelyn bent down, heart hammering. The pattern was emerging. The time. The watching. The way the forest shifted. Something, or someone, was orchestrating everything. And Lucas Carter was caught in it. They returned to town as dawn broke. Hollow Creek looked ordinary in the light. Birds sang. The fog lifted. The creek murmured normally. But Evelyn knew better. The forest kept secrets. It watched. And it was patient. That night, back at the station, Evelyn studied the sketches in the notebook. There were markings for paths she hadn't seen. Symbols she didn't understand. And then, at the bottom of one page, "If you follow the wrong path, you disappear. Watch the watcher. Always 2:17. Her pulse raced. 2:17, the same time Lucas was last seen. The pattern was clear. Someone, or something, was choosing moments, selecting victims, orchestrating events with deliberate timing. And Hollow Creek was its stage. Evelyn felt a cold realization settle deep in her chest. This wasn't a random disappearance. This was predation. Calculated. Precise. And horrifyingly methodical. She couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her, though no one was there. The fog pressed closer. The trees creaked. The wind whispered. And in the back of her mind, she heard it again, a soft, deliberate voice carried on the night wind. "I am here. Watching. Waiting. Always." The case was no longer just about Lucas Carter. It was about the watcher in the trees. And Detective Evelyn Shaw had just begun to understand its reach. The fog rolled back over Hollow Creek that night like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Detective Evelyn Shaw drove slowly along the narrow, winding road that led to the bridge, her headlights barely cutting through the white-gray veil. The town felt deserted, though she knew better. Some residents were awake, whispering behind closed curtains, watching her drive past. It was 2:17 a.m., the time that had haunted the reports. Lucas Carter's disappearance. The footprints. The watcher in the trees. Evelyn felt it in her bones. Tonight would be different. Tonight, something would move. She parked near the bridge and stepped out, boots crunching against wet gravel. The mist clung to her coat and hair. She shone her flashlight across the water, the beam disappearing into the fog like it was swallowed whole. The creek ran slow tonight, its surface mirror-like, reflecting nothing. No moon, no stars, no light from the town. Only the fog. Evelyn scanned the area. Her flashlight caught movement at the edge of the woods, flickering shadows. She tensed, hand on her weapon. "Lucas?" she called softly. Nothing. Only the wind, or was it a whisper? Her breath hitched in the chill. The fog carried sound strangely here, twisting it, distorting it. She stepped toward the path into the forest. The footprints were gone, or perhaps hidden by the fog. Then, a rustle. Behind her. To her left. She spun. Nothing. Her pulse accelerated. The forest felt alive, stretching, bending around her. She remembered the notebook, the sketches, the strange symbols. If you follow the wrong path, you disappear. Evelyn forced herself forward. Every step on the wet earth sounded like an alarm. The path narrowed, overgrown with shrubs and low-hanging branches. She stopped at a fork. Left. The path descended toward a hollow lined with mossy rocks. Right. The path climbed toward a ridge overlooking the creek. Her intuition screamed left, but her gut pushed her right. The notes, "Watch the Watcher," echoed in her mind. The Watcher was always patient, always deliberate. Which path led to Lucas? Which path led to her? Evelyn chose the ridge. The fog thickened as she ascended. Her flashlight caught movement again, a shadow flickering between trees, just ahead. But when she raised the beam, nothing was there. Then came the sound, footsteps. Bare, soft, deliberate. Not her own, matching hers in rhythm. She froze, heart racing. "Who's there?" she demanded. No reply. Only the footsteps continuing behind her, matching each step. Evelyn spun. Nothing. Only fog and trees. She moved faster. The footsteps mirrored her pace. She ran. They ran. At the top of the ridge, she found a clearing. The fog swirled unnaturally here, curling in tight spirals. Something dark crouched at the center, human-shaped, but elongated, unnatural. Evelyn froze, raising her flashlight. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. Its presence felt wrong, as though it warped the air around it. She took a step forward. The figure flickered, like a broken reflection. A radio crackled. Static! Then a whisper. A voice she didn't recognize. "You shouldn't be here." Evelyn's skin prickled. She spun, shining her flashlight across the trees. The fog swallowed the sound, making it impossible to tell where it came from. She realized the forest itself was speaking. She stepped carefully into the clearing. The figure remained crouched, still and silent. Then, slowly, it rose. Long limbs moving fluidly, almost gliding. Its head tilted, pale eyes reflecting the flashlight like glass. Evelyn's training screamed at her to retreat. But she forced herself to speak. "Lucas Carter," she called. "I'm Detective Shaw. I'm here to help you. If you can hear me, step forward." The figure didn't move. But then the fog shifted. Shapes emerged. Not one, but dozens, shadows along the edges of the clearing, leaning, stretching, watching. All silent. All still. Evelyn's heart pounded. She raised her weapon, scanning. Every shadow seemed alive, aware of her. Her flashlight flickered. A cold wind whipped through the clearing, carrying faint whispers. Then she heard it clearly. "You're too late." Evelyn's instinct screamed. She retreated, but the path behind her seemed to change. Fog thickened, branches stretching to block her way. She stumbled. Her flashlight caught movement, feet. Bare. Human-like. Following. Waiting. She turned. Nothing. The shadows in the clearing had vanished. The Watcher was gone. But something had taken its place. A trail. Small footprints, leading off the ridge, deeper into the forest. Evelyn followed. The trail led to a small, abandoned cabin. Wood rotting, windows broken, doors hanging loose. The fog seemed to settle inside, thick and impenetrable. Evelyn's flashlight illuminated the interior, overturned furniture, soot from a long-dead fire, and, on the floor, a small shoe. Lucas's. Next to it, a note, scratched into the wood with a knife. "The fog hides everything. Trust nothing you see." Evelyn swallowed hard. The Watcher was teaching him, teaching Lucas to disappear. Or worse, teaching the forest to claim him. A sudden noise made her whip around. A shadow darted across the room, disappearing into the fog that pooled in the corners. Evelyn aimed her flashlight. Nothing. Her heart raced. This was no ordinary kidnapper. No random disappearance. This was calculated, patient, and the forest itself seemed complicit. She explored the cabin carefully. Drawers overturned, papers scattered. A makeshift bed in the corner, blankets torn, nothing else. No Lucas. No footprints leading outside. Only the fog creeping through broken windows. Then she noticed markings on the wall, symbols she had seen in the notebook. Circles, triangles, lines connecting trees, numbers, always 217. She pressed her hand to the wall. Cold, damp, something beneath the surface. She tapped. The hollow sound confirmed it. The wall wasn't solid. A cavity inside. Her flashlight caught something else, a small panel near the floor, hidden beneath rotting boards. She pried it open. A ladder, leading down. Evelyn hesitated. The Watcher's influence was everywhere. She could feel it. but she had no choice. She descended. The ladder led to a small subterranean space, no larger than a closet. Damp, musty, lined with roots and stone. And there, in the corner, sat Lucas Carter. He was pale, shaking, eyes wide. You came," he whispered. "Yes," Evelyn said, kneeling beside him. "I'm here to get you out." He shook his head. "You don't understand. The watcher, the fog, it watches. It remembers. I can't leave. Not fully. It sees everything. It knows everything." Evelyn's stomach twisted. Who is watching?" Lucas swallowed hard. "The forest. Hollow Creek, it's alive. It chooses. And tonight, it chose me." She helped him to his feet. As they climbed the ladder back into the cabin, the fog outside seemed thicker, pressing against the windows. She shone her flashlight around. Nothing visible. But Evelyn could feel it. Eyes. Watching. Patient. The footprints they had followed into the forest were gone. Only the cabin remained, hidden in fog, silent, waiting. Evelyn whispered to Lucas, "We'll get you home. It's over." He shook his head. "No, it's not over. It's everywhere. The fog hides it. It moves. And if you leave, it will come back for someone else. Always 217. Outside, the fog began to lift slightly as they exited the cabin. Evelyn radioed back up, giving their coordinates. She scanned the forest one last time. Shadows lingered along the tree line, long and unnatural. She couldn't tell if they were human or something else entirely. Lucas's words echoed in her mind. It moves. It watches. It chooses. The forest, Hollow Creek, the watcher, whatever it was patient. It waited for the perfect moment. The perfect person. And the fog was its shield, hiding its movements from the world. Evelyn shivered. She had saved Lucas, but Hollow Creek had not revealed its secrets fully. Not yet. They drove back to the town. The fog retreated slowly, curling into the hollows of the creek. Lucas was quiet, staring out the window, haunted. Evelyn watched him, realizing the weight of what they had witnessed. The watcher was real, and Hollow Creek would not let its secrets go easily. That night, as she lay awake, Evelyn reviewed the notebook again. Symbols, numbers, maps, and repeated warnings. Always 217. The fog hides everything. The watcher chooses. She knew one thing for certain. Hollow Creek had chosen its next chapter, and she would be pulled into it sooner or later. The next morning, Detective Evelyn Shaw woke to a sky smothered in gray. The fog had not lifted completely. It lingered along the banks of Hollow Creek, curling like fingers across the low hills and the black water. Even in daylight, the town felt abandoned, too quiet, too deliberate. Evelyn reviewed the evidence in the station. Lucas Carter had been returned safely, or mostly safely, but the boy was still pale, trembling, and unable to fully describe what had happened in the forest. He insisted the watcher had eyes everywhere, and the fog had a voice. He claimed the forest moved, shifted, and watched them even when no one was there. To any skeptical observer, it sounded like trauma talking. But Evelyn had seen the forest herself. The patterns, the shadows, the unnatural silence, the way the fog wrapped around movement as though it were alive. She had no doubt. "Evelyn, you need to see this," Jonah Keene said, pulling up maps on his laptop. He was her tech partner on the case, but lately, he seemed almost unnerved, too. His usually calm demeanor had frayed over nights spent reviewing the forest paths, the cabin, and the strange notebook Lucas had left behind. "What is it?" Evelyn asked, leaning over the screen. Jonah pointed to the creek on the map. "I mapped every report of disappearances and sightings going back 20 years. Every single one is within a half-mile radius of Hollow Creek. And every time the fog was reported, something vanished. Something watched. I think the river itself plays a role." "The river?" Evelyn frowned. She had walked its banks and waded along the edges, but the water had seemed normal. "It's just a creek." Jonah shook his head. "Maybe to us. But the pattern suggests otherwise. Every disappearance, every odd sighting, every 217 anomaly, it's always close to the river. Sometimes directly on it. And the victims? They describe whispering. Low, unintelligible sounds carried by the wind or water." Evelyn swallowed. "Whispering water," shadows in the fog, and some watcher. This isn't normal. Jonah grimaced. No, it's not. And the thing is, Lucas isn't the first kid to vanish near that creek. He's lucky to be back. By mid-afternoon, Evelyn decided to return to the river. She needed to see for herself if the creek was as sinister as Jonah's map suggested. She packed near an old wooden dock, weathered and warped, that extended a few feet into the black water. The fog was thin now, a ghostly veil over the surface, reflecting gray clouds. The air smelled damp and sharp. She stepped onto the dock, flashlight in hand. The wood creaked under her boots. The river ran sluggishly, dark as ink, with small waves rippling softly against moss-covered pilings. Evelyn leaned over the edge, scanning for any clue, any trace. And then she heard it. Soft at first. A low, rhythmic sound, like whispers carried on the water. Almost inaudible. She froze. The sound seemed to echo from the creek itself. Not from the forest, not from any person nearby. The river whispered. Her flashlight caught something at the edge of the river, a small flash of movement. She adjusted the beam. Nothing. Then the water rippled unnaturally, curling upward in a small vortex, like it had been disturbed by something below. Evelyn knelt, shining the light into the black water. The shadows beneath the surface seemed alive. Shapes moved with intent, as though something just beneath the surface was observing her, calculating her actions. Her pulse raced. The creek wasn't passive. It was an active participant in Hollow Creek's secret. It had watched for decades, hiding in plain sight, ready to claim anyone who wandered too close. A rustle behind her made her spin. The fog pressed closer to the dock, curling in spirals, masking everything. She could barely see past a few feet. The forest lining the riverbank seemed alive, swaying unnaturally. And then she saw it, a figure standing among the trees, pale, thin, watching. The watcher. Evelyn took a slow step back. "Lucas," she called. But the figure didn't move. It didn't blink. Only the fog swirled around it unnaturally. Then came a second sound, a whisper, faint, carried on the river's surface. "You shouldn't be here." Her stomach twisted. The same voice Lucas had described. The same unnatural rhythm Jonah had warned about. The watcher's presence was no longer limited to the forest. The river itself had become part of it, carrying sound, motion, and intent across the landscape. Evelyn raised her flashlight toward the river. The surface rippled again. Small objects floated briefly, twigs, leaves, but one drifted closer than natural currents should allow. A small shoe. Mud-caked. Male. Lucas's? She leaned closer. Then a note floated into her hands, wet but legible. "The river remembers. The fog hides. You are watched." Evelyn's hand shook. She shoved the note into her coat pocket. She needed to leave. Needed to regroup. She turned, only to see movement in the trees again. Shadows flitted along the edges of the riverbank. Not just one shadow, but many, human-like, elongated, indistinct. Watching. Waiting. Silent. She drew her weapon, scanning. The shadows didn't advance, didn't retreat. They mirrored her movements. She took a step forward. They did the same. She froze. They froze. The watcher was here. The river had drawn it out, using the fog as cover. Evelyn realized something terrifying. The creek wasn't just a site for disappearances. It was a conduit. A tool. The watcher could manipulate it, direct attention, isolate victims, and conceal its presence within the fog. Every whispered warning Lucas had given. Every 217 anomaly. Every disappearance. It was orchestrated. Determined, Evelyn followed the river upstream, moving slowly along the muddy banks. Every snap of twigs underfoot echoed unnaturally. She noticed small disturbances in the mud, tiny footprints, half submerged in the wet soil. Not human. Not entirely. They led to an old, abandoned boathouse. Its walls were rotting, windows broken. The fog seemed to congregate around it, pooling like a living mist. Evelyn approached cautiously. Inside, the floorboards groaned under her weight. The boathouse smelled of damp wood and decay. She swept her flashlight around. Nothing at first, then movement. Small, deliberate, in the corner. A notebook lay open on the floor, its pages soaked but legible. Similar to the one Lucas had found in the forest. Maps of the river, sketches of trees, and annotations. Paths across water, timings, 217. Watch the currents. They guide. They hide. They wait. Evelyn's breath caught. The watcher didn't just use the forest. It used the river, the fog, and the land itself as a system. A mechanism. A trap. She turned to leave, but a soft noise stopped her. A whisper, coming from the river. The next step is yours. She stepped back into the fog outside. The water was smooth again, black and silent, as if nothing had happened. Yet Evelyn could feel the movement beneath the surface. The creek's current shifted imperceptibly. She imagined eyes under the water, watching, judging, planning. She radioed Jonah. You need to see this. The river, it's part of it. Part of the watcher's system. It manipulates the fog, the currents, the paths. It hides them. Jonah's voice, usually calm, trembled slightly. I've been seeing the patterns, Evelyn. This is bigger than the forest. The watcher isn't just a figure anymore, it's a network. And the river is one of its main conduits. Evelyn swallowed. It's everywhere. It's patient. And it's intelligent. I don't think we can stop it. Not fully. That night, Hollow Creek's fog returned. Denser. Closer. The townspeople noticed, shuttering windows, locking doors. The river whispered along its banks, carrying sounds no one could identify. Evelyn returned to the station, reviewing Lucas's account and the new notebook. The river had become part of the watcher's system, its presence amplified, spreading further, able to manipulate those who wandered too close. She realized the terrible truth. Lucas had been lucky. The watcher had let him go, for now. But the river had other paths, other currents, and the fog would protect them. And 217 would come again. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She dreamt of the river rising, carrying shadows across the land. A fog thick enough to swallow entire streets. Of whispers following her everywhere she went. She woke to silence. Too perfect. Too deliberate. She knew the watcher was patient. The river waited. And Hollow Creek had already chosen its next victim. Evelyn Shaw realized she was no longer merely investigating disappearances. She was being watched. The river whispered, soft and constant. 217, always 217. Detective Evelyn Shaw drove back to the Hollow Creek Bridge just after dusk, the fog curling low across the river like a living thing. The town seemed to shrink under the dim, diffused light. Houses disappeared behind the mist, trees blurred into shadow, and the creek itself swallowed every sound. Evelyn knew that the watcher thrived here, in places like this, edges, thresholds, points of transition. She parked at the side of the road and stepped onto the bridge. Wetwood creaked beneath her boots, each step amplified by the dense fog. She shined her flashlight across the planks, scanning for any sign of disturbance, any clue that might explain how Lucas had survived and yet been so thoroughly terrorized. The water below lapped quietly, but something was different tonight. Not the river itself, but the feeling of being observed. Evelyn had felt it before, the sensation of eyes, invisible and patient, tracking her movements. Tonight it was stronger. She crouched to examine the underside of the bridge. Damp beams, rotting planks, algae-coated posts. She noticed faint scratches, long and deliberate, on one of the central support beams. Claw marks? No. Too precise. Almost intentional, as if someone, or something, had traced a message into the wood. Her flashlight caught a glint. A small, circular object wedged between two planks. She pried it loose. A tiny lens. A makeshift camera. Batteries corroded, wires frayed. Someone had been recording here. Not recently, maybe weeks ago, but deliberately. Evelyn's pulse quickened. The watcher wasn't just in the forest or the fog. It had eyes beneath the bridge, eyes hidden in plain sight, always observing. Her radio crackled. Detective Shaw, any updates? Evelyn hesitated. I found a device. Someone, or something, has been watching from under the bridge. Tiny camera. Could be old, could be decades old. But there's intent. Someone wants to record everything here. Jonah Keene's voice came over the line, tense. You mean, the watcher's system extends into physical devices now? That's more advanced than I thought. Exactly, Evelyn said, moving along the edge of the bridge. A flashlight illuminated the fog swirling over the river. The water seemed darker, thicker, deeper than usual. like it was hiding secrets. And perhaps it was. She stepped off the bridge carefully, following the riverbank upstream. The forest loomed on either side, shadowed and silent. The fog swirled around her legs, thickening with each step. She could hear the river murmuring, carrying a rhythm, soft, deliberate, almost like a chant. A movement in the corner of her eye made her spin. Between two trees, a figure crouched, pale, elongated, watching. The watcher. Evelyn froze. Her flashlight's beam illuminated the shadow. It didn't move, didn't blink. Only the fog curled around it unnaturally. She realized the forest itself had become part of the watcher's system, able to manipulate perception, bending light and fog to hide and reveal at will. She followed the river's curve to a small clearing. Here, the bank dropped sharply to the water. Roots of massive trees clung to the soil. And in the center, she noticed something: footprints. Dozens of them. Some human, some not. Patterns interwoven, overlapping, like a map of movement around the riverbank. Evelyn bent down, examining the prints. She recognized Lucas's shoe, imprinted in mud, but nearby were others, bare footprints, small and narrow, long and thin, not human proportions. The watchers. A radio buzzed faintly, crackling in static. Then, the whisper, not from the radio, but carried through the fog. You shouldn't have come. Evelyn's pulse raced. She scanned the trees. Shadows flitted across the fog, fleeting, elongated, inhuman. The watcher had drawn her here, into the heart of its domain. She climbed down the bank to inspect the waterline. There, partially submerged, she noticed a small wooden box. She pulled it free of the mud. Inside, photographs. Black and white, grainy, yellowed with age. Faces of children, men, women, all of them captured in moments of vulnerability. Footsteps in the mud, eyes wide, unaware of the camera. And then the most chilling, Lucas's photo, taken 3 nights ago, his wide eyes staring directly into the lens as though the watcher had anticipated her arrival. Evelyn felt bow rise in her throat. The watcher didn't just observe. It catalogued. It prepared. It predicted. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement across the river. Something, or someone, was drifting downstream in the fog. Not walking. Gliding. Slowly. Unnaturally. She raised her flashlight, catching a pale reflection in the water, a face. Not human, elongated, the eyes impossible. She ducked behind a tree. Her breath came in shallow bursts. The watcher was aware of her presence. Every step, every movement recorded, every decision anticipated. She realized then that Lucas's survival was no accident. The watcher had allowed him to leave, perhaps as part of its own pattern. A warning. A lure. A test. Determined to understand, Evelyn moved further along the river. Roots snagged her boots. Mud squelched beneath her feet. The fog thickened, curling around her torso like tendrils. The river whispered, soft, unintelligible, but distinct. Then she saw it, a submerged structure. A small, half-sunken shack, its roof broken, beams jutting at odd angles. The river had hidden it for decades. Its windows were underwater, yet she could make out shapes inside, shadows moving, shifting, waiting. She approached cautiously. Her flashlight illuminated the interior, long-forgotten furniture, broken tools, journals scattered across the floor. And among them, more photographs. Faces of those who had vanished near Hollow Creek. Footsteps, eyes wide, unaware. The watcher had used this river, this hidden place, as a repository. A catalogue. Evelyn's heart pounded. She could feel it, eyes everywhere. From the river, the fog, the trees, even beneath the bridge. The watcher's system was vast, patient, intelligent. Every disappearance, every clue, every photograph meticulously recorded. A whisper rose from the water. 2:17. Her pulse spiked. The time. Always 2:17. Lucas. The footprints. The river. The watcher's pattern was unbroken. And tonight, Evelyn realized, the watcher was observing her. She stepped back from the river, carefully mapping her route to avoid footprints. Every branch, every shadow seemed deliberate. A tree snapped softly. She froze. Movement flitted behind the fog. Not one, but several elongated shadows, human-like but distorted. Watching. Waiting. Her flashlight caught a reflection in the water, dozens of small lenses, cameras embedded in the riverbank, half submerged, invisible unless you were searching for them. Every step she had taken had been recorded. The watcher had known she would come. Evelyn's stomach turned. She had been inside the system. Recorded. Anticipated. Catalogued. She returned to the station to meet Jonah, who was waiting with more maps and notes. "I traced the patterns back through history," he said, voice tense. "Disappearances go back decades. Every single one near this river. All 217. And look here, these align with the watcher's notes in the notebooks Lucas found. Bridges, fog, currents, forest paths, it's all connected." Evelyn ran her hands through her hair. "It's more than human. It can manipulate perception, guide victims, hide itself. The river, the fog, the forest, it's all one system." Jonah nodded grimly. "And we're part of it now. Every observation, every record we make, it can adapt. Anticipate. Learn. The watcher doesn't just wait for victims. It waits for us." Evelyn swallowed hard. "So we can't stop it?" Jonah shook his head. "Not fully. Not without understanding the system completely. And we don't." That night, Evelyn returned to the bridge. The fog had returned thicker than ever. The river whispered beneath her feet. Shadows danced at the edge of her vision. The air pressed in, damp and suffocating. She could feel the watcher moving within the fog, beneath the bridge, in the currents of the river. Observing. Waiting. Recording. A soft sound rose above the river's whisper, a step. Another. Then dozens, echoing in patterns. Not her steps. Not human. She raised her flashlight. Shadows twisted, elongated, flickering like they were never truly solid. And the river whispered again. 2:17. Evelyn Shaw realized, with a sinking certainty, that Hollow Creek had chosen its next chapter, and she had already been written into it. The eyes beneath the bridge were watching, and they would not stop. The fog rolled in thick that morning, thicker than Evelyn had ever seen. Hollow Creek seemed to shrink under its weight. The familiar trees twisted into something alien, their trunks barely visible behind the mist. Even the creek, sluggish and dark, felt heavier, its water moving with a subtle but deliberate current, as though it carried unseen weight. Evelyn Shaw drove slowly along the old road that ran parallel to the river. Every turn, every bend, seemed unfamiliar. Paths she had walked the day before had vanished, replaced by low fog and shadowed trees. Her GPS blinked uselessly, the signal distorted as if the forest itself refused to be mapped. This was Hollow Creek's design. The watcher had a rhythm, and Evelyn was beginning to realize that the fog dictated it. Paths didn't vanish randomly. They were erased with purpose, hiding where the next victim, or investigator, might walk. She parked near the bridge and stepped out, flashlight in hand. Her boots sank slightly into the wet earth, sending ripples of sound into the silence. She scanned the area. Nothing. No footprints. No signs of Lucas Carter's earlier presence. The mud had reset itself. The forest had reclaimed the evidence. A rustle behind her made her spin. Fog clung to the trees like a living wall. Shadows moved in and out of visibility, shapes too tall, too thin, too deliberate. Evelyn's pulse spiked. The watcher was here, and she had walked right into its domain. The forest path she had followed yesterday had vanished entirely. In its place was thick undergrowth and twisted roots, impossible to navigate. She knelt, trying to find any trace of footprints, human or otherwise, but the earth was smooth, untouched. The vanished path, she thought grimly. Hollow Creek erased the roots it didn't want discovered. A radio crackled. Jonah's voice came through, shaky. "Evelyn, we've been reviewing the maps. There's something you need to see. The paths aren't just natural. They're altered, reconstructed. The watcher is rearranging the terrain itself, subtly, imperceptibly, to hide or to guide." Evelyn's stomach sank. Guide to what? "That's what we're trying to figure out," Jonah admitted. "It's like the river, the fog, and the forest all work together. Paths appear and vanish depending on who's walking. And it chooses." Determined, Evelyn pressed forward, navigating by the faint impressions of tree bark and moss she had memorized the day before. Every snap of a branch underfoot echoed unnaturally in the silence. She could feel eyes everywhere, the forest, the fog, even the river watching her. Then she saw movement ahead, a thin figure, pale, crouched between two trees, just at the edge of visibility. The watcher. She froze, flashlight trembling in her hand. The figure didn't move, didn't blink. It simply observed, perfectly still. Evelyn swallowed. Every instinct screamed to run. But she had to understand. She had to map the vanished path, to see what the watcher intended. She stepped forward carefully, noting the direction of the figure. As she did, she realized the forest itself seemed to shift. Branches bent subtly, roots twisted underfoot. Paths she thought she knew had changed, gone, replaced by brush and mud. The vanished path was alive, recalculating based on her movement. Evelyn's heart pounded. The watcher wasn't merely observing, it was controlling the environment, rearranging the world to suit its design. Every footprint, every step, every glance could be anticipated. She followed anyway. The path led to a clearing near a small bend in the creek. The fog thickened here, curling into tight spirals that obscured the ground. She knelt to examine the earth. Footprints. Multiple layers. Human. Not human. Patterns overlaid each other like a code. She traced the largest set with her finger. They led toward the river, then abruptly vanished. No marks in the mud. No disturbance in the underbrush. The vanished path. Hollow Creek had erased it entirely. A radio buzzed. Jonah's voice. Evelyn, we're seeing the same thing on the satellite feed. Paths appearing, disappearing. But you're not imagining it. They're literally vanishing. The forest is rewriting itself around you. Evelyn's pulse raced. Then, where is Lucas? Where is the next victim? How does this system work? Jonah's voice was grim. I don't know, but the watcher always chooses. And it's patient. Evelyn's flashlight caught a small, partially hidden entrance at the edge of the clearing, a narrow trench covered with leaves and debris. She approached cautiously. Inside, the walls were lined with roots, mud, and water seepage. It led down, underground. The river was close enough to touch through the thin soil and roots. The whispers she had heard on the surface intensified, carried along the damp walls. Faint, distorted, unintelligible. The watcher was near. Watching. Recording. Waiting. She descended carefully. The path narrowed. Roots snagged her boots. Mud covered the floor, making each step treacherous. And then she saw it. Footprints. Not human. Thin, elongated, moving deliberately, leading deeper into the vanished path. The trench opened into a cavern beneath the riverbank. Water trickled from the walls, pooling in low spots. The smell of damp earth and rot filled her lungs. Evelyn's flashlight caught movement. Shadows shifted against the walls. And then she saw them, dozens of small cameras embedded in the walls, pointing outward. Some old, some newer, as if the watcher maintained its system constantly. Every angle recorded. Every movement noted. Every visitor anticipated. The walls themselves seemed to pulse slightly, almost like they were alive. Evelyn realized the watcher's domain wasn't just the forest or the river. It extended beneath the earth, beneath the bridge, into hidden spaces it controlled. A soft sound made her freeze. Footsteps. Not hers. Not human. Echoing along the cavern. Thin, deliberate. Paired with whispers from the water. 2:17. Always 2:17. Evelyn's pulse spiked. The time. The code. The system was engaged. Someone, or something, was moving within the vanished path now. She followed cautiously. The shadows flickered along the walls, moving with intent, guiding her toward a final chamber beneath the riverbank. Inside, she found evidence of previous victims, journals, tattered clothes, photographs. Faces wide-eyed, frozen in terror. Footprints imprinted in mud, but vanished in some areas, erased as though by magic. And then she saw Lucas's backpack, discarded but intact. He had been here. The watcher had allowed him to leave, but it had left a trail, a pattern, a message for anyone following. Evelyn's flashlight caught movement again. A thin, elongated figure crouched in the shadows. The watcher, its eyes, if they could be called eyes, glimmered faintly in the dim light. The cavern seemed to pulse around it. The air grew colder. Whispers rose in intensity, echoing off the walls, blending with the river's distant current. You shouldn't be here. Not yet. But you will see. Evelyn raised her flashlight. The figure flickered, almost translucent. It moved with unnatural grace, gliding closer, though it never fully revealed itself. Her training screamed to retreat, but she was too deep, and the watcher wanted her here. She noticed a series of symbols etched into the cavern walls. Circles, lines, triangles, and numbers, always 217. Patterns she had seen in Lucas's notebook and the boathouse. The watcher's code, etched into the earth itself. She realized with growing horror that the vanished path was a test. Each path, each erased trail, each layer of fog and shadow was designed to guide, or mislead, those who entered. The watcher controlled everything: perception, paths, timing, even memory. And tonight, Evelyn understood fully. The forest, the river, the fog, the bridge, they were all part of a single, living system. A system built to observe, to manipulate, to claim. A soft movement behind her. She spun. Shadows flickered along the walls. The whispers grew louder, layered, unintelligible but deliberate. Footprints appeared briefly in the mud, then vanished. The watcher was demonstrating its control, reminding her that the vanished path had no fixed form. She backed away slowly. The cavern twisted around her. A side passage she had not noticed before now appeared, leading toward the river above. She realized the watcher could manifest and hide paths at will, controlling who saw what. And all of it funneled toward the river. Evelyn emerged near the water's edge, gasping. The fog had thickened again, hiding the river, hiding the land, hiding everything she had walked through. Shadows lingered along the riverbank, watching, patient. She looked back. The entrance to the vanished path had disappeared entirely. Nothing remained but mud, roots, and fog. The watcher had erased its trail. She was alone. For now. Back at the station, she and Jonah reviewed everything. Maps, photographs, journals, notes, footprints, patterns, all pointing to the same truth. Hollow Creek was a living system, a network designed to observe, manipulate, and control. Jonah's voice was grim. The vanished path, it's not random. The watcher guides victims, but it also guides observers. It learns from them, anticipates them. We can't predict it, only react. Evelyn nodded, exhausted. We're part of its system now. Every observation we make, every decision, is being recorded. Jonah swallowed hard. And the next 2:17, it's coming. And we may not be ready. That night, Hollow Creek's fog returned heavier than ever. Shadows stretched along the riverbank. Whispers carried in the wind, faint but deliberate. The vanished path waited. And Evelyn Shaw realized, with chilling clarity, that Hollow Creek would not let her leave easily. The watcher had claimed the land, the river, the forest, and beneath the bridge, the vanished path had eyes. Watching, waiting. The town of Hollow Creek was quiet that morning, quieter than usual. Fog lingered in the hollows and along the creek, curling around tree trunks like thick fingers. Detective Evelyn Shaw stood at the edge of the river, staring across to the opposite bank. The watcher had shown her many things: the forest, the vanished path, the bridge beneath which it hid its eyes. But tonight, it had made its intention clear. The crossing was next. The river seemed ordinary in daylight, sluggish and black, but Evelyn knew better. She had seen its unnatural movements, its ability to obscure, to guide, and to hide. And she knew that anything that entered the water, or attempted to cross, would be watched, analyzed, and judged. Jonah Keene arrived shortly after dawn, his face pale and tense. Evelyn, I ran the data. The river isn't just a boundary. It's part of the system. It moves, but selectively. Currents appear and vanish depending on who's near. Paths open and close. And sometimes, they swallow you. Evelyn frowned. So, it's not just the forest or the bridge. The river itself is part of the watcher's domain. Jonah nodded. Exactly. The silent crossing isn't an accident. It's deliberate. The watcher, it tests. It separates. It chooses who can continue and who disappears. Evelyn swallowed hard. The river had always seemed a natural obstacle, something to observe Lucas, to intimidate. But now she realized it was far more than that. It was an active participant in Hollow Creek's system. They approached the riverbank. Fog clung low, obscuring the water's surface. Evelyn shined her flashlight across the black current. Nothing moved. Yet, instinct told her the river was alive, attentive. The water rippled faintly, almost as if aware of her presence, as if it knew her intentions before she even took a step. A sudden noise, a soft, deliberate splash, made her spin. Nothing was visible, only fog and shadow. She noticed faint footprints in the mud leading to the water. Human, not human. She couldn't tell. The vanished path had trained her eyes to distrust appearances. Evelyn and Jonah moved carefully along the bank. Every step seemed amplified in the silence. The creek whispered beneath their boots, carrying faint sounds that twisted in the fog, laughter, cries, whispers of people who had vanished. She felt it in her bones. The watcher was here, judging, observing, anticipating their actions. Then she saw it, a fallen tree forming a natural bridge across the river. Simple, unassuming, almost inviting. The silent crossing. She knelt, examining it. Bark wet, slippery, stretched just far enough to span the creek. And faint scratches on its surface, footprints, handprints, marks too deliberate to be random. Someone, or something, had crossed this way before. Jonah stepped forward. This is it. The crossing. But look, there's a pattern. Footprints appear and vanish. The watcher can erase or create paths. It decides who can use them. Evelyn nodded, heart pounding. Then we have to be careful. One wrong step, and the river won't just hide you. It will take you. She led the way onto the log. It creaked under her weight, wet and unstable. The fog thickened, curling around their legs and obscuring the opposite bank. Every movement felt amplified. The river whispered beneath her boots, carrying faint sounds of past victims, cries, gasps, warnings she couldn't fully hear. Halfway across, she paused. Something shifted in the fog ahead. Shadows moved along the bank, flitting between trees. Elongated, pale, human-like but wrong. The watcher, observing, judging, waiting. A splash to her right made her spin. The water churned briefly, then stilled. Something, or someone, had emerged, partially submerged. She raised her flashlight, catching a pale reflection, eyes, wide, unblinking, impossible. The river itself seemed to have taken form, guiding the figure along its current. She froze, heart racing. The watcher didn't just watch from the banks or trees. It could manipulate the river, shape illusions, and control perception. Every movement, every choice, every hesitation was anticipated. Jonah whispered, "Keep moving. Don't stop. It wants hesitation." Evelyn nodded, carefully continuing across the log. Each step was deliberate, measured. The river murmured beneath her feet, the water carrying whispers in a language she couldn't understand. The farther she moved, the more she felt the watcher's presence pressing in from all directions. Halfway to the opposite bank, the log shifted slightly. Wet bark made her boots slip. She grabbed a low branch to steady herself. Behind her, the fog thickened unnaturally, forming shapes, elongated shadows, thin figures, all watching, all waiting. A whisper rose from the river itself, carried on the current. 2:17, always 2:17. Evelyn's pulse spiked. The code. The pattern. The watcher was testing her, measuring her response. She didn't stop, didn't look back. She focused on the far bank, where shadows of trees blurred in the fog. The crossing demanded attention, focus, and resolve. One wrong step, one hesitation, and the river could claim her. Suddenly, something emerged from the fog ahead, a shape, pale, crouched low, eyes gleaming. The watcher. Evelyn froze. Its presence warped the fog, bending light and shadow. She could feel it in her chest, a weight, a pressure, as though the air itself was alive. Jonah's voice crackled in her ear. "Don't stop. The watcher wants you to hesitate. Keep moving." Evelyn forced herself forward. The log shifted again, rocking under her weight. The river below churned slightly, as if responding. Whispers rose, indistinct but urgent. Shadows twisted in the fog. The watcher's influence was everywhere. She reached the far bank, breathing hard, heart racing. The log beneath her feet was slick, muddy. One misstep and she would have been swallowed by the river. She looked back. The log was gone, completely vanished. The river had erased it, leaving only the smooth, dark water and fog. She realized the silent crossing wasn't just a path, it was a test. The watcher chose who could succeed, who would be erased, and who would be led to further terror. The river itself was part of the pattern, an active participant in the system. Evelyn and Jonah moved cautiously along the far bank. The fog was thicker here, curling into tight coils around tree trunks and roots. Shadows moved in unnatural ways, elongated, twisting. Every step felt calculated, observed. The watcher had anticipated their route. Then they saw it, a series of symbols carved into tree trunks, partially hidden by moss. Circles, lines, triangles. Numbers, always 217. The same code Lucas had left behind, repeated in every notebook, every hidden structure. Jonah pointed. It's guiding us. The watcher wants us to follow a specific path, to observe and record. But why? To learn. To test. Evelyn shook her head. Not just to test. To control. To predict. Everything we do here is anticipated. Every choice, every step. They followed the path deeper into the forest, the river to their left, black and murmuring. The fog pressed in, dense, muffling sound, distorting perception. Shadows flitted in and out of visibility, elongated figures with pale faces, watching, waiting. Evelyn realized that the silent crossing had changed them. The forest, river, and fog had combined to manipulate their senses. Their minds were being tested, their fears amplified. Every step forward required focus, determination, and courage. At a bend in the river, they found a small wooden pier, partially submerged, decayed, and covered in algae. On it, footprints. Human, elongated, overlapping, leading to a partially hidden entrance at the riverbank. Evelyn's heart raced. The watcher's system was converging here. Paths, footprints, symbols, fog, and river, all guiding to a single point. The vanished path, the silent crossing, they were all part of the same mechanism. She stepped onto the pier. The wood groaned under her weight. Shadows flickered in the fog. The whispers rose in intensity, layered, indistinguishable but urgent. 2:17, the crossing, the next step. She realized then, this was not just a test of courage or resolve. It was a selection. The watcher decided who continued, who would vanish, and who would be recorded for its system. Evelyn and Jonah paused at the entrance, the fog swirling around them. The river murmured beside them, the air thick with anticipation. Every shadow, every whisper, every movement felt deliberate. Evelyn swallowed hard. She knew the watcher was watching, waiting, measuring, and the silent crossing had marked them. Whatever lay ahead, whatever the watcher intended, there was no turning back. Hollow Creek had chosen them. The river whispered once more, soft but insistent. 2:17, always 2:17. Evelyn Shaw realized with chilling clarity that the silent crossing was more than a path. It was a test, a trap, and a judgment. And the watcher had eyes everywhere, beneath the bridge, in the river, and within the fog itself. Hollow Creek had claimed another threshold, and the true terror of what lay ahead was only beginning. The forest on the far side of Hollow Creek was alive in ways that no ordinary forest should be. Evelyn Shaw stepped carefully along the narrow path, Jonah Keene close behind her. The fog clung low, curling around roots and trunks like a living shroud. Every sound, twigs snapping, leaves rustling, distant water, was amplified unnaturally, echoing in patterns that set her nerves on edge. The trees themselves seemed different here. Their trunks were gnarled and twisted, their branches clawing at the fog. But it wasn't their shape alone that unnerved Evelyn. It was the sense that the forest was listening, responding, whispering. She paused, kneeling to examine the forest floor. Footprints. Not human. Thin, elongated, almost spectral. They overlapped in impossible patterns, tracing the vanished path from the river to this part of the forest. The watcher's influence extended here, shaping paths, guiding movement, and controlling perception. Evelyn, look at this, Jonah whispered, crouching beside her. He pointed to faint scratches on the base of a tree. Lines carved carefully, symbols repeating in patterns, triangles, circles, numbers, always 217. It's everywhere, Evelyn said. Her voice was low, reverent, fearful. The watcher isn't just in the forest or the river. It's in the trees themselves. Every path, every shadow, every branch is part of its system. Jonah nodded. And the whispers. I've been running the audio from the field recorders. The forest carries them. Echoes of victims, warnings, instructions. It's all a network. Alive. They pressed on, moving deeper into the forest. The path narrowed, winding between massive oaks and maples, their roots creating natural barricades. The fog thickened, curling around them, muffling sound and distorting vision. Shadows moved at the periphery, elongated figures slipping in and out of visibility. Evelyn realized the forest itself had become an instrument. The watcher manipulated the fog and trees to obscure paths, conceal victims, and manipulate observers. Every step they took was anticipated, every hesitation recorded, and the whispers grew louder. At first, they were indistinct, faint rustling, almost imperceptible. Then words began to emerge, carried on the wind and through the fog. Do not stray. Do not look back. 2:17. Evelyn's pulse raced. The whispers weren't random. They were instructions, warnings, messages from the watcher, or perhaps echoes of those who had vanished. The forest itself seemed to speak, guiding or manipulating, shifting in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Jonah adjusted his headphones. These aren't hallucinations. The audio captures it. Voices embedded in the forest itself, amplified by the fog, carried through the trees. The watcher is using the environment as a weapon. They reached a small clearing. The ground was littered with old leaves, mud, and twigs. At its center, a tree far larger than the others loomed, its branches sprawling like skeletal arms. The bark was scarred with hundreds of scratches, symbols, numbers, faces carved faintly into the wood. Faces of past victims. Evelyn's stomach churned. She recognized one immediately, a photograph she had seen among the items in the submerged shack. The boy's face, eyes wide in terror. He had been here. The watcher had marked him. And now, the tree bore the evidence. This is a record, Jonah said softly. The watcher marks them in the forest. Every path, every victim, every observation, it's all here. Evelyn nodded, trembling. And the whispers, their instructions, warnings. The forest itself is alive, communicating with the watcher's will. As they studied the tree, movement flickered at the edges of the clearing. Shadows, pale, elongated, and impossible. The watcher's presence pressed against the fog, shaping it, bending it. Evelyn raised her flashlight, scanning the tree line. A figure crouched low between two trees, just visible through the fog. It didn't move. It didn't blink. It simply observed. 2:17. The whisper rose again, soft, omnipresent. The forest seemed to pulse with it, carrying the warning in every direction. Evelyn realized that the watcher's reach extended far beyond the trees and river. It touched the air itself, the fog, the sounds, and even the minds of those who walked within its domain. She and Jonah continued along the path. The trees grew closer together, branches tangling overhead. Light from the fog above barely penetrated. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves felt amplified, deliberate, as if the forest itself were testing them. Then they found it, a narrow archway formed by two leaning trees, roots intertwined like fingers. Beyond it, a faint path led further into the forest, disappearing into dense fog. Evelyn paused. This must be the next segment of the vanished path. The silent crossing led us here. And now, the forest itself is the next stage of the test. Jonah swallowed. We're deeper in than any recording shows. And the whispers, they are getting stronger. The watcher knows we're here. They stepped through the archway. The forest seemed to shift around them. Branches moved subtly, roots twisted, and mud rearranged itself. Footprints that had been visible moments before vanished. Paths changed. The vanished path adapted to their movements. Evelyn realized something terrifying. The watcher controlled not only perception but also reality itself within Hollow Creek. It manipulated paths, erased evidence, and created new trails at will. They were inside a living system, and every action they took was anticipated. A whisper rose from the trees. Follow or vanish. 2:17. Her pulse spiked. The code. The pattern. The watcher's influence extended beyond the river, beyond the bridge. It had reached the forest itself. Deeper into the woods, they found remnants of those who had vanished before. Small personal items, journals, photographs, and footprints leading into places that now no longer existed. The vanished path twisted and doubled back on itself, creating loops that disoriented the mind. Evelyn noticed faint scratch marks on tree trunks along the way, symbols repeating the 217 code. Each mark seemed deliberate, a message left by the watcher or perhaps by those who had attempted to follow it before. Jonah paused, examining the mud. This isn't random. It's a guide and a trap. The forest itself is directing us, deciding who continues and who disappears. Evelyn nodded, her throat tight. We're inside its system now. Every observation, every step, it knows. It records. It anticipates. The path led them to a small creek tributary, black and sluggish like the main river. Water whispered over rocks, carrying faint echoes of voices from the past. The vanished path ended at its bank, but the opposite side was obscured by thick fog. Evelyn realized the next stage would be another crossing, another test. The silent crossing had prepared them, but the watcher would escalate. The forest whispered, carrying messages in twisted language. Do not hesitate, do not stray. 2:17. She felt the pressure of the watcher's presence like a physical weight. Every shadow, every movement in the fog, every whisper in the trees reinforced the truth. They were being judged. Jonah adjusted his flashlight, scanning the area. There's something in the trees, watching us. I can feel it through the equipment. Shadows moving in patterns, almost intelligent. The watcher is active, and it knows we're here. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She scanned the tributary, the fog, the twisting path beyond. She realized that the watcher didn't just manipulate physical space, it manipulated perception, awareness, even thought. Every whisper, every movement, every shadow guided them along a path predetermined by an intelligence that was patient, deliberate, and malevolent. They crossed the tributary carefully, using fallen logs and rocks hidden beneath the fog. Every step required precision. The fog thickened around their legs, carrying whispers that pressed against their minds. Shadows twisted and elongated along the banks, flitting in and out of visibility. Evelyn realized that the forest was not just alive, it was conscious, guided by the watcher, and designed to influence thought, fear, and action. Every tree, root, and branch was a tool. Every whisper a command. When they reached the far bank, the path ahead seemed impossible. The fog was denser than ever. Trees leaned inward, forming natural barriers. Yet, faint symbols etched into the back indicated the next stage, a continuation of the vanished path. Evelyn turned to Jonah. The watcher is testing us at every level now, the river, the bridge, the vanished path, and the forest itself. Each stage is harder than the last. Each path a test of survival and perception. Jonah nodded, pale, and it adapts. Every movement, every observation, it learns. It knows our fears, our patterns. Every choice we make is anticipated. Evelyn swallowed hard. Then we keep moving. We survive the forest. We follow the whispers. And we hope the next stage doesn't claim us. As they pressed onward, the fog pressed closer, curling around them, bending light and shadow. Shadows danced at the periphery, elongated, pale, watching. The whispers rose in intensity, layered, unintelligible but deliberate. The trees themselves seemed to move, closing in, guiding their steps, testing their resolve. The vanished path had brought them here, deeper into Hollow Creek, and the forest itself now became an instrument of the watcher's will. And Evelyn realized, with chilling clarity, that the whispering trees would not let them leave unobserved. The fog thickened, shadows shifted, and the whispers carried a warning she would never forget. 2:17, always 2:17. Hollow Creek had claimed the forest, and the watcher's influence extended into every branch, every root, every whispering leaf. Evelyn Shaw understood now that survival required more than courage. It required understanding a system that was alive, intelligent, and patient. The whispering trees were watching, waiting, judging, and the vanished path had led them exactly where the watcher wanted. The whispering trees had pushed Evelyn Shaw and Jonah Keene to the far edge of the Hollow Creek forest, where the fog hung heavier than any sunlight could pierce. Branches clawed at their clothing as they trudged through thick undergrowth. Every step felt deliberate, measured, as if the forest itself counted their choices. Evelyn had long since stopped glancing back. She knew better than to look. Hesitation was dangerous. They emerged into a clearing. In the center stood an old, abandoned house, its windows dark, broken, and staring like hollow eyes. The tenant's legacy, Evelyn realized. The stories of Hollow Creek had always hinted at a figure, an original occupant of the property who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a home that seemed alive with observation. This must be the place. Jonah scanned the clearing nervously. This house, it's older than anything else in the area. Property records show it's been empty for decades. But the vanishing patterns, they all start here. Evelyn's flashlight illuminated the rotting porch. Boards creaked under their weight as they stepped forward. The house smelled of damp wood and decay, a smell that seemed to cling to the fog and the earth itself. "This is where the watcher began," she said softly. "The tenant, or whatever occupied this place, created the foundation for everything we've seen. The paths, the river, the fog, the whispering trees, it all started here." Jonah swallowed hard. "And everything we've encountered since, is a continuation of their legacy. Whoever, or whatever, was here first left a system behind. A blueprint for observation, manipulation, disappearance." Evelyn pushed the front door open. It groaned, protesting decades of neglect. Dust motes floated in the weak light of her flashlight. The interior was sparse but orderly, a few broken chairs, a table, papers scattered across the floor. Old photographs adorned the walls, yellowed with age. Faces wide-eyed, staring. Some familiar, from prior disappearances. Some unfamiliar, the earliest victims perhaps. Her gaze caught one photograph in particular, a man seated in a chair, eyes intense, sharp, almost predatory. His gaze seemed to pierce through the photograph, into the room, into Evelyn herself. "This must be him," she whispered. "The tenant. The origin of the watcher." Jonah bent closer. "Look at the patterns around his eyes. Carved into the photograph frame, symbols. 217, the same as everything else. He created it, or at least started it. Every disappearance, every vanished path, every crossing, it's all connected to him." Evelyn moved deeper into the house. The air was heavier here, charged with an almost imperceptible energy. Shadows clung to corners, bending light unnaturally. Her flashlight flickered. She felt it, eyes everywhere, not just in the forest or the river, but inside the walls, the ceiling, the floorboards. A soft sound, a whisper, rose from the floorboards. "Observe, record, vanish." Her pulse quickened. The house itself seemed to breathe, exhale, and speak. Every creak of wood, every groan of the structure, carried meaning. She knew the watcher's system had begun here, in this very house, and that its reach had only grown. In the main room, she noticed a large map pinned to the wall. Lines traced across the town and forest, the river, and the paths she had traveled. Symbols marked certain locations, triangles, circles, numbers, always 217. Pins indicated disappearances, clusters of observations. Evelyn traced the lines with her finger. Every vanished path, every silent crossing, every whispering tree was mapped here. The tenant had not merely observed. He, or it, had designed a network, a system of control. Jonah's voice trembled. This is a manual for the watcher. Not just observation, instruction. It shows how it manipulates space, perception, even thought. And every disappearance feeds the system, strengthens it. Evelyn nodded. Every victim, every survivor, every investigator, part of the legacy. And we've become part of it too. The floor creaked behind her. Evelyn spun. Shadows flickered across the wall, elongated, twisting. A whisper rose in the air, almost human but distorted. 2:17, the legacy continues. She realized that the tenant's presence had never left. The watcher was not only a system, it was an extension of its creator. A consciousness, patient, deliberate, and enduring. Hollow Creek was its domain. Every tree, river bend, foggy bank, and path was an extension of the tenant's will. Jonah stepped closer. "We need to find any notes or journals. Anything that tells us why this started. Every clue could help us understand the system." Evelyn began searching the house systematically. In a small room off the main hall, she discovered a desk covered with papers and journals, brittle with age. The writing was meticulous, obsessive. Names, dates, symbols, observations, instructions, patterns. She read aloud from one entry. "Observation is everything. The paths, the fog, the trees, the river, they are instruments. Eyes in all places. Victims provide data. Patterns emerge. Those who survive feed the system further. Each observer becomes a participant. Jonah's voice was barely a whisper. This is horrifying. It's like a manual for predation disguised as observation. The tenant, this watcher, it's a system. Alive. Evolving. Evelyn nodded grimly. And every vanished path, every crossing, every tree, it's all an extension of this house, this legacy. It spreads outward, touching the river, the forest, and Hollow Creek itself. They explored further. Behind a false wall in the study, they found a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The stairwell smelled of damp earth and decay, different from the rest of the house. It led beneath the foundation, into a subterranean chamber. The walls were lined with shelves, filled with photographs, journals, and small devices. Tiny lenses, like the one Evelyn had found under the bridge, were scattered across tables and shelves. The watcher had begun here, experimenting with observation, recording, and manipulation. She realized that the vanished paths, the silent crossing, the whispering trees, all of it, was planned meticulously from this chamber. Every detail, every test, every observation originated here, emanating outward. A sudden sound made her freeze. Footsteps. No, too light, deliberate, echoing unnaturally. Shadows flickered across the chamber, almost human in form but elongated, distorted. The watcher's presence filled the space. Evelyn felt it pressing against her mind, influencing perception. A whisper rose. You see, you record, you join the legacy. Her pulse raced. She realized the watcher's legacy was not just observation, it was recruitment. Survivors, witnesses, investigators, even those who entered the house now became part of its system. Every action, every choice, every observation strengthened it. Jonah whispered urgently, "We can't linger. Every moment here, we're feeding it." Evelyn nodded. "We gather what we can. We survive. And we escape, if that's even possible." In the chamber, they found a journal bound in cracked leather. The handwriting was elegant but obsessive. The first entries described the tenant's early observations, disappearances along the creek, patterns in fog and forest. Later entries detailed experiments, manipulating paths, observing reactions, recording movement, and teaching the system to predict outcomes. One passage made Evelyn shiver. The watcher is more than eyes. It is will. It is patience. It learns from all who traverse its domain. Every observer becomes part of the system. Those who vanish are data points. Those who survive continue the legacy. She realized that the vanished path, the silent crossing, and the whispering trees were all stages of this system. Hollow Creek itself had become a living instrument of observation and control. They descended deeper into a hidden cellar beneath the chamber. The air was damp, musty, thick with anticipation. Shadows moved against the walls, elongated, almost intelligent. The watcher's influence pressed in from every corner. At the far end, a final artifact awaited, a large map, centuries old, depicting Hollow Creek, the river, the forest, and all known vanished paths. Symbols marked every disappearance, every observation, every test. The tenant's handwriting detailed instructions for manipulating the environment, guiding observers, and erasing evidence. Evelyn traced the lines with her finger, connecting paths she had walked herself. Every vanished path, every silent crossing, every whispering tree, they all converged here, beneath the house, in the tenant's subterranean lair. A whisper rose from the shadows. 2:17, the legacy continues, observe, record, vanish. Evelyn realized the full scope. The Watcher's legacy was not merely observation, it was creation. It had designed Hollow Creek as an ecosystem for fear, control, and study. The vanished paths, silent crossings, and whispering trees were all instruments, designed to manipulate, test, and claim. Jonah's voice was tight with fear. We've seen it in the forest, the river, the bridge, and now here. It's everywhere, and it learns from us. Everything we do, everything we see, feeds it. Evelyn swallowed hard. Then we document what we can. We map it. We survive. But we have to understand, its legacy will continue unless we expose it. Unless we break the system. The shadows flickered again, elongated forms pressing against the edges of perception. The whispers rose, layered, insistent. 2:17, you record, you join the legacy. Evelyn and Jonah realized that the house, the forest, the river, and every vanished path were part of a single, living system, one that evolved, learned, and endured. The tenant's legacy was alive, patient, and ever-present. As they ascended back to the main floor, the fog outside had thickened even further, curling around the house, pressing against the windows and doors. Hollow Creek itself seemed to breathe, alive with anticipation. The Watcher had claimed the land, the river, the forest, and now the house itself. Evelyn Shaw understood, with chilling certainty, that the tenant's legacy was far more than history. It was present, alive, and waiting. And 2:17, the code, the time, the pattern, was not merely a mark. It was a signal, a pulse, a heartbeat of Hollow Creek itself. The Watcher's eyes were everywhere, and the legacy would not end. The fog lay thick over Hollow Creek that night, heavier than Evelyn Shaw had ever seen. Shadows twisted unnaturally along the river bank, and the forest groaned with the weight of unseen movement. Every tree, every branch, every ripple of water seemed deliberate, as if the entire landscape itself was alive and watching. Evelyn and Jonah stood at the edge of the river, peering into the black, uninviting water. The silent crossing had tested them once. The whispering trees had tested them again. Now, the tenant's legacy called them to the final stage. The final observation. Jonah adjusted his flashlight, the beam slicing through fog that was nearly opaque. "This is it," he whispered. "Every disappearance, every path, every vanished path, every silent crossing, it all leads here. The Watcher is waiting. It knows we're coming." Evelyn nodded, her hands trembling. "We've seen its system. We've seen the paths, the river, the trees, but we haven't seen it fully. This is the heart of Hollow Creek. And whatever happens next will decide who survives." She glanced back toward the forest. The fog seemed to pulse, curling around branches, rising like a living wave. Shadows moved within it, thin and elongated, impossibly fast. The Watcher was present everywhere, in the trees, in the river, in the fog itself. The path to the heart of Hollow Creek was marked by symbols etched into stone and wood, recurring patterns, triangles, circles, and the ever-present 2:17. Evelyn traced them carefully, noting how they aligned with the vanished paths they had traversed. Each pattern reinforced the system's intelligence, guiding the observer, predicting movement, and manipulating perception. Jonah muttered under his breath, "Every step we take, every observation, it feeds the Watcher. The final observation isn't just watching, it's completing its data set." Evelyn swallowed hard. The truth weighed on her. They were not merely observers. They were participants. Every choice, every hesitation, every glance was being recorded, analyzed, and used to refine the Watcher's system. Hollow Creek was alive, and its consciousness extended into every branch, every ripple, every whisper. As they approached the center of the forest, the fog parted slightly, revealing a clearing unlike any they had encountered. A platform of stone and moss rose above the riverbank. It was perfectly circular, marked with intricate symbols, some familiar from the tenant's journals, others completely alien. In the center stood a figure, pale, elongated, unnaturally still. The Watcher. Evelyn's pulse spiked. It was more than human, or perhaps less. Its presence distorted reality around it, bending shadows and fog into patterns that made the clearing seem larger than it was. Its eyes, or where eyes should have been, glimmered faintly, observing, calculating. Jonah whispered, "It's waiting for the final observation. We're the subject now." The figure didn't move. It simply observed. And Evelyn understood immediately. This was not a test of courage. This was the culmination of decades, perhaps centuries, of design. Every path, every vanished crossing, every whisper in the trees had led to this moment. A soft murmur rose in the clearing, carried by the fog. Observe, record, participate. 2:17. The symbols on the ground began to glow faintly, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed alive. Shadows twisted around the platform, coiling and uncoiling, forming patterns that reminded Evelyn of the vanished path itself. "This is it," she whispered. "The system's heart. Everything converges here." Jonah scanned the clearing. "We have to understand it." We can't just move blindly. The Watcher is calculating. It knows our fears. It knows our choices. Every hesitation, every doubt, it predicts. Evelyn nodded. Then we act deliberately. We observe, record, and survive. She stepped onto the platform. The air shifted immediately, thicker now, pressing against her chest. Shadows flickered in impossible angles. The fog swirled in currents that seemed to follow her movements. She felt the Watcher's presence in every nerve, every pulse, every breath. Jonah followed cautiously. The symbols, they are not just decoration. They are instructions. The Watcher communicates through them. If we read them correctly, we can anticipate its moves, perhaps even manipulate the observation. Evelyn studied the glowing symbols. They pulsed in time with the whispers. Triangles pointed directions. Circles marked positions. Lines connected points in patterns too complex for immediate comprehension. Yet, somehow, they made sense. The system was alive, intelligent, and deliberate, but also logical. This is the culmination, she murmured. The final observation isn't random. It's structured. Predictable, if we can decode it. A soft ripple of water reached the platform. The river itself seemed alive, shifting unnaturally, carrying whispers along its current. Shadows stretched from the forest into the clearing, converging on the platform. Evelyn realized then the horrifying truth. The final observation was not merely watching. It was a synthesis. Every previous test, every vanished path, every silent crossing, every whispering tree had been feeding data to this moment. The Watcher would analyze their every reaction, every thought, and every choice here. It was a living algorithm, and they were the final variables. Suddenly, the figure moved. Slowly, deliberately, gliding across the platform. It did not walk. Its elongated limbs seemed to float above the surface. The fog shifted with it, curling around the body like living smoke. Its eyes, or the glowing orbs where eyes should have been, focused on Evelyn. The whispers rose in intensity. Observe, record, vanish. 2:17. Evelyn felt her mind resist. Every instinct screamed to flee, to run back to the forest, to the river. But she knew better. Hesitation here meant assimilation. Participation, not fear, was the path to survival. She forced herself to remain still, to breathe deliberately, to observe. The Watcher extended a thin, pale hand toward the symbols on the platform. The glowing shapes pulsed in response. Shadows from the forest shifted, forming patterns on the ground, overlaying the symbols with new data. The vanished path itself seemed to extend into the platform, folding space subtly, bending perception. Jonah whispered, "It's showing us. Teaching us. The final observation isn't just recording us, it's instructing us on the system's logic. If we understand, we survive. If we hesitate, we vanish." Evelyn nodded, focusing intently. She memorized the symbols, the patterns, the sequences in which shadows moved across the platform. Every pulse of light, every whisper, every subtle shift of fog was part of a coherent algorithm. Time seemed distorted. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe only seconds. The Watcher moved around the platform, interacting with the environment, analyzing, predicting, adjusting. Evelyn realized the entire clearing had become a living model of Hollow Creek, river, forest, paths, and trees all represented here in microcosm. Her pulse synchronized with the symbol's rhythm. She traced the sequence in her mind, anticipating the Watcher's movements, recognizing the logic behind the vanished path, the silent crossing, and the whispering trees. She understood, at last, the full scope of the tenant's legacy. Hollow Creek itself was the experiment. Every disappearance, every observation, every pattern existed to refine the Watcher's system. And now, in the final observation, the system was complete, except for one variable, her response. A whisper rose directly into her mind. 2:17, complete, or join the legacy. Evelyn's vision blurred slightly as fog swirled around her. The Watcher hovered near, its presence pressing in, observing, analyzing, recording. She clenched her fists, focused, and stepped through the final sequence. Symbols beneath her feet shifted in response to her understanding. Shadows elongated and receded. The fog twisted to form a path leading to the forest beyond the clearing. The final observation concluded, and Evelyn felt the system's scrutiny lift slightly. She had participated correctly. Observed. Recorded. Survived. Jonah followed, pale but steady. We did it. The platform, it reacted to your observation. It let us leave. Evelyn nodded, glancing back at the figure. The watcher remained, motionless, blending into the shadows. The platform dimmed, the symbols fading into the mossy stone. Hollow Creek was still alive, still watching, still recording, but the system had acknowledged their comprehension, their participation, and their survival. The vanished paths, the silent crossing, the whispering trees, all were now understood. At least, partially. The tenant's legacy remained, but they had passed its ultimate test. The fog lifted slightly as they returned to the forest path. Shadows receded. The river whispered normally. For the first time, Hollow Creek felt navigable, less hostile. But Evelyn knew it had not relinquished control. The Watcher's system remained intact, patient and enduring. 217, the number lingered in her mind. A signal. A pulse. A heartbeat of Hollow Creek itself. She understood now that the Watcher would always exist. It would always observe. And its legacy would continue. But she had survived. She had participated. And she had seen the truth. As dawn broke over Hollow Creek, Evelyn Shaw and Jonah Keene emerged from the forest. The fog thinned. The river flowed quietly. The trees whispered faintly in the wind, carrying remnants of the Watcher's presence. Evelyn glanced back once. In the distance, the abandoned house loomed, silent and still. Hollow Creek held its secrets, but she now held understanding. The vanished paths, the silent crossings, the whispering trees, and the final observation had revealed the system, the method, the logic. And while the Watcher remained, patient and eternal, Evelyn knew one thing with certainty. She had faced it. She had survived. And she would tell the story of Hollow Creek. The tenant's legacy endured, but so did the witness. The fog lingered, the river whispered, the trees waited. Hollow Creek would never forget, and neither would she. The vanishing at Hollow Creek had reached its conclusion, but the Watcher's eyes remained everywhere, patient, waiting for the next observer to wander its domain.